And we're live. What's going on, people? Happy hump day. All right, y'all know the drill. Let me get these links out. There's those notifications coming in. They do pretty good on YouTube. I don't know if I've ever gotten the Facebook ones on time or not. Either way, let's see what in the world. Okay, so this is all right. Let's get these links posted. Oops, I don't think I can. All right, here we go. All right, y'all know the drill. I can't see anything you're saying, so I'll have to address you as I get back. But let me share these links. Take too long. Actually, I should do about half and wait a little while and do the other half. That way I can get a few more shares in because they never let me share to more than a dozen or so. So if y'all have a group that I'm not sharing to, or you don't see me in, feel free to share it. But make sure it's all right with them. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. That's for sure. Don't want to be posting where it's not wanted or not welcomed. They're getting colder where everybody is. I had a little cold snap after this last rain. Hang on. I'll try to post that one later. Let's see. All right. Hey, Tristan, what's going on? Hey, Curtis, what's up, brother? Hey, Kimbo. Wachita? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I have no idea. How's everything going down in your area? Wachita. I don't know how to pronounce that. Somebody got the phonetics on that? You joined my war zone? I was probably either watching a stream or asleep, bro. I've a lot of times I'll sit there and be watching a stream and I'll have it going, and when they in between games or something, I'll open up and run a game, and then sometimes if it's late, usually about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I'll start nodding off. But the streamer I watch, Ghost comes on about usually about anywhere from 11:30 to 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and streams to the next morning about 9. And those are about my hours anyway. So, Washata, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that. Washata or Washeta. Yeah, that's the next question. Washata or Washeta. Anyway, welcome to the podcast. 3-ish. It's 3. Yeah, I was probably just watching. Send me messages. Send me a message in game and on. Well, he streams to Kick, so I don't know. Kick messages probably don't work that good. Yeah, definitely send me a game chat, man, when that happens. What's going on in Colorado? Yeah, it started getting cold here. I don't know about where y'all are, but oh yeah, let's see here. Before we go on, I guess Saturday I forgot to mention prayers for Prohibition 1920. He's lost his grandpa this past week, and let's all keep him in our prayers. They did a lot of videos together. I guess last year or so of his grandpa's life, he had an opportunity to get with his grandson and do some videos of them shining together. So I know that was a very special thing for him and for Prohibition. So let's keep both them and their family in our prayers. And Frank, I think he's got a surgery coming up soon. Let's keep him in our prayers. And of course, David Masters and his wife Ruth, who's got broken legs and a injured back from a car accident. So let's keep all them in our prayers. And if y'all have anybody that you want to include in the prayer list, that just mention them in chat here, and we'll include them in our prayers. But got to remember our brothers and help them in their time of need and pray for them. Your berry mash keeps foaming over. I'm telling you, man, wait till you do a banana. You think that's bad? The bananas, man, they go crazy. They have, I don't know. Sometimes I think it almost like doubles, in size. But yeah, just all you can do is split it in another bucket until it starts settling down. And once it starts settling down, you can put them back in the same bucket or just let them go. I try to split them up. I try to give myself plenty of room after the banana mishap. You try to never want to do that again. Especially if you want to, your old lady, you got to do the cleanups too. Don't wait for your old lady to do it, because if you do, it's going to be, you're not going to be doing that in here anymore. So got to clean up, man. I've had it on the ceiling before. Yeah, it'll definitely grow on you, Henry. It sure will, buddy. It gets huge. impressive. I'm happy with the viewers I get. If we get more real viewers, that's wonderful. But as far as buying fake names and just to boost numbers in the screen, that's not what we're about, man. Started out with a 5-gallon bever pot still. First one was pretty rough. My electric hot plate was set way too high, I think. Well, what happened to it, Tristan? Did you? Now, was this when you were cooking your mash or when you were running the steel? I'm assuming running the steel. What happened? Awesome. First time doing wine. It's not brandy yet. We're just making wine right now. Once you get that done, then we'll think about doing brandy. Because sometimes you drink that wine, it's like, damn, man, I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to go further with this or not. What's going on, Billy Reed? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, I did my first few times at least. I scorched the shit out of the grains every time I cooked them. It was till I learned, I was a kid. Hell, I just didn't know half what I was doing, learning as I go. All I had was a Foxfire book and a little bit of knowledge, but not much. What's going on, Mr. Reed? Mountain room still bubbling. That's good. It's getting cold. It might bubble for a little while. Everything's going to start taking longer. People are going to be, people are going to start like, why is my fermentation taking so long? Anytime the temps drop, the yeast activity kind of goes along with it. Unless you got, even if you have the wine yeast, they tend to go slower, and it's best that they do go slower. So maybe turn the house, huh? Yeah, it's time to bring them in. That's what I was going to do. I was going to see what the temps were this next week or this week. Talking 40s, man, already 40s. Yeah, I was talking political stuff here before I logged on. Yeah, 41. Wow, almost into the 30s, man. Oh, okay, here's the lows for here this week. 45, 40, 48, 48, 48, 52, 52. High, 68, 68, 73, 74, 74, 76, 79. So it's going to go next Tuesday, 79 to 50. That's pretty good little swing. And that's why our whiskey tastes so good in them barrels, because them big temp swings in the spring and fall. Really, if it's just cold, straight cold, and it doesn't warm up a lot, it helps. But or real hot. But these swings, these high swings, is really what helps the whiskey in those barrels. Mario, I'm glad you mentioned that. I've actually been working on. Let me find it. Let's see if I can find it this way. Should be in my notepad. Just one moment. Okay, so yeah, it's going to take up more than a screen full. So I am going to. I haven't really had time to proofread it all. I've just typed it up this past week. Been working on it, trying to make some changes. Basically, what I did, the first one is simple instructions for beginners using cracked corn or ground cornmeal. That's basically just taking your corn and grinding it down. or using just cornmeal from the store. But when you do, make sure you don't get anything that's enriched or fortified, right? Just get just plain ground meal. Don't get the enriched, don't get the fortified, because that has a lot of vitamins and other stuff in there that may affect your flavors. And a lot of times they fortify and enrich it with iron, and you definitely don't want that in your fermentations. That's a big, huge no-no. So if it's been enriched with iron or fortified with iron and other things, you don't. It's not what you want. Best is just get you a good old cracked corn from the store, and if you want to run it through a blender or grinder. If you got a grinder, that's awesome. If you got a grinder, just get yellow dent #2 corn to start with for beginners. A lot of people will bring up heirloom and all this other stuff. Not for beginners. Heirloom corn isn't for beginners. It's not the way you want to go. It's for once you do a few runs, because you don't want to be running a bunch of expensive corn on your first or second or third run, like I did. You don't want to scorch the shit out of it and ruin the flavor and defeat the purpose. So, but I'm going to put these two in the DIY Shine and Stuff group and in the militia. So if all y'all want to go to those pages, if you can, and open this up, give me a second to post them. And let me save these two. I'm not sure. Did I get now the multi-grain ones? I'll put that up. I've got also the multi-grain ones, and with the simple one with just the ground corn and cornmeal using the steeping method, I did two different steps. One step is using the high temp alpha amylase, and the other one's using the powdered alpha amylase. And the reason I did it, because both of those are fairly different in the way you cook your corn and the way well, not necessarily cook the corn, but the way you treat it after you cook it. Because with the high temp alpha amylase, um, you're able to go ahead and you know let it cool to a specific temperature before you do the next step. Whereas with the glucose, once you gelatinize your corn, you got to stir it, stir it, and stir it, and let it cool to 155 before you add that glucose. 150, 55. So before you add that powder. So that's going to be the big difference in the two. So Mario, are you in DIY Shine Stuff or in the Moonshine Militia? And I wish there was a way that I could share files with individuals on here directly, but the StreamYards don't have that capability yet. What's going on, Clint? Good to see you, brother. Just in time. Hey, Dustin. Low 7, high 70, low 40. Sounds like you close to me then. Yeah, buddy. Probably guilty as charged, my friend. It's funny. Yeah, I still read the menu, but I got to find woman. That's something I may read the menu and I look, but when it comes down to it, man, I got the best woman there is. I wouldn't trade her for nothing. Put too much sugar in about 20 pounds for 8-gallon batch. Sweet feed corn mash took about 2 weeks to settle, and then didn't have hydrometer yet, so couldn't check the ABV. Think you smeared it. It happens, and the great thing about it, Tristan, as long as it's not scorched, you can put everything in a pot, proof it down, and do it again. Or you can add it to some of your next mash that goes into the pot and just run it all again. So unless you scorch the shit out of it, that's one of the beautiful things about this. You can always, if you don't like the taste, you can run it again and try to improve on it, or you can put it on a column and run it over some bowl plates and totally take most of the taste out and just get just a straight ethanol. When's the annual Shiners Fest? Man, we have them all over. We're going at the end of the month to Arkansas for a Music and Moonshine Festival. It's November 1st. I think that same weekend OBX is having theirs on the Outer Banks. There's just festivals all over the place. How it's going in Wisconsin. We got some of the members here from Wisconsin. You are, Mario? Okay. These will be going into the file section. Just give me 1 second here. And let me get this uploaded to those 2 file sections. I'm going to put it. And if you don't know, when you go to the group page, you'll see the name of the page. You'll see a big row of pictures of people. And right underneath that, you'll see where it says several tabs there: discussion, featured members, media, files, and guides. If you just go to the file section, you'll be able to see the files and in the order that they were uploaded. So let me see. All right, let me save that file a little differently. Save as, shoot, notepad. And we'll also do I'm going to do some beginner things for even if you don't have the alpha amylase, you're just relying on your malted grains, but that's going to be more advanced and that's going to come later. So save as, where's that going? Into documents. Okay. All right. Let's change it to there. Now this is just a simple text file. And let's put it in militia. And in a militia page, files is at the very end. So it's a little bit different, but y'all will be able to find it. All right, so let me see, make sure those uploaded. Refresh the page. Yep, simple steps for beginners mashing corn using the step method or the steep method. Now this is steeping. This isn't trying to cook the corn, and I think that's where a lot of beginners mess up is, you know, when they cook the corn, getting it scorched and stuff. They don't realize, you know, just how imperative it is to stir the shit out of it. And another problem you have is if you're just using like a spoon or something to stir it, this stuff gets so thick and so it's really hard to stir and keep that bottom agitated, right? So it's tough to cook, especially once you start getting the right, you know, grain to water ratio, like 2.5, you know, pounds per gallon to 3. I know some people that use more. If you're using the powdered enzyme, you may try to bump it up to 3, you know, to try to get a little bit more starches to try to convert, because the powdered amylase really doesn't convert as well as the liquid. So you're not going to get as good a conversion and therefore as much production out of using powdered alpha versus the liquid high temp. But if you got it, use it. If you can afford to just get the other and not worry about it, you can. I try to use a little bit of both. So, you know, because I have it, and I'll use the high temp when I'm supposed to, and then when it gets down to 150, 155, I'll throw a little alpha in there just to help and just use it up, because I'm too tight just to throw that $11 bag away. You know, I'm just silly like that. But I hope that it helps some. If not, whatever, it makes me feel better. I'm not wasting. I hate wastefulness. But they're in there if y'all want to open those up and check them out and read through them. And if you have questions about it, you know, this is a good time to ask. Clint, you check it out, see if I should have added anything. Hmm. But I'm going to open it up and we're going to go over it and we're going to talk about it. And that's so if you have it, it's awesome. If not, it's not all lost because we're going to sit and talk about it. So I set it up for a 10-gallon mash. I was going up there in upstate New York. Now, you notice a lot of these New Yorkers, when they say they're from New York, if they're from upstate, they let you know. They say, I'm not from the city. Yeah, I like that. New York's a beautiful state. Everybody thinks New York is like just a city, everything, just all cities and stuff. But there's a beautiful country in New York outside the city. That's all right, Eli. You know me, brother. So we'll get you in there. Or I'll tell you what, if you want to, just join the DIY shine and stuff. This is the name here. Just DIY shine and stuff, and then we'll get you in the other one later. After I'll let the other admins know that you're from my class. Eli Franks. Let me make a note of that. Matter of fact, we got you in there, Eli. You good, brother? All right. Now, which favorite do you have, Tristan? Do you have the 3-pot or the football steel? If you got the football steel, then it's going to be pretty easy to convert and add, a column and anything and all these other things that you want. If you got the 3-pot, then you're going to have to do some pretty big modifications to the cap, the pot top, the cap that's on top of your pot to make it to where you can add a ferrule, 1.5 2-inch ferrule. I recommend 2. Depending on what size, did you mention it? 5-gallon? 8-gallon batch. Okay. 20 pounds and 8 gallons. Yeah, you could have probably put maybe a couple of more gallons of water in that and fix that problem. You could 2 pounds per gallon is about a 1090, which is a pretty high. So you could have gone a little bit more with maybe 3 gallons and would have gotten you down to a 1080-ish range. And that would have been fine too. Oh, and a batch of sweet feed. So that had some sweetness in it as well. But yeah, you can just rerun that. It's not a big deal. But yeah, you don't want to exceed around 2 pounds per gallon. Just straight when you're making a sugar shine. So if you have anything else that's also adding sugars, you want to kind of cut it back. And the best thing to do when you run into that situation, is add sugar as needed. Just have it, melted up in what you do. Just take some water, boil it, and start adding sugar. Super saturate it to where it won't hardly take any more sugar. Keep it stirred because you can squirt sugar too, and keep it stirred up real well, and then just add that syrup to the mash until it brings it up, but don't do it on top of yeast, and all that hotness on top of yeast. But you add it until your hydrometer tells you about what you want to start at. But back to you, man. Just we've got a lot of Shiners festivals. There's tons of them. There's probably a couple of dozen. We try to keep a calendar of events on in the Moonshine Militia group. Damon, helps. Well, he set it up and set it up through a Google Calendar thing, and so I think this year's already filled out. But next year, if you're in the group and you know of a festival and you don't sit on that calendar, get up with Damon and let him know and see if he can add that to your calendar. So let's see. Back to Tristan. So Theobilly's got a lot of. Let me see what your answer was. I'm waiting for your answer, Tristan. Is it a 3-pot still? 3-pot? Okay. It's going to be tough to add a column to that. You really need a ferrule or some fitting that's going to allow you to add the column. And like on these, and it's not lost. All's not lost. It's a 3-pot is a great setup. There are going to be some modifications that you need to do, and go to fieldbillymoonshine.com and start watching his videos. They almost specialize in that. I mean, they do a lot of other stuff too. I shouldn't say specialize in it, but they've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people with Vevers, making modification. He's got videos. They've got parts and stuff that you can buy. But you can weld on a 2-inch fitting. I don't know how big the steel is. I mean, if it's a 5, you might want to go with something maybe smaller. And it's maybe something that you want to just practice on and get used to, and get some runs under your belt, and use that as your just your regular pot steel. And then maybe looking once you get into the hobby and start enjoying it and doing more and more things, then maybe you can look at doing a football steel. And when I say football steel, let me show you a picture of it. Just a second here. I need to get this to my area where I keep all my pictures. All right, here we go. So this is the Weber football steel. Now you can see why we call it a football steel. You see at the top there where it's got that head that looks like a football, and then it's got a canister condenser on the side of it, which isn't a bad little condenser either. But that's you can get those in, I think, 8, 13, 15 maybe, and 18 and a half, maybe not 15. I can't remember the different sizes, but 18 and a half, depending on how big you want to go. And then when you do that, if you go to Philbilly's or other places, you can find a column that looks like this, and this will sit right on top of it. It's got your deflagmator, it's got your little sight glass, see what's going on here. This has got your copper mesh inside here, or you can put your copper mesh here so you can, that's what I put mine in here and just watch it and watch the alcohol dance on it. It's kind of, just a little, thing to watch. I know. But then this is the deflagmator. If you want to increase your reflux, you can decrease the temperature of the water. I have mine set up where I've got 2 different inputs going to that, the deflagmator and the condenser. So I can, gauge the temperature of the water going into here and adjust it. I got a hot and a cold mix going into it, and I can adjust the cold or the hot that goes into it. So that works really well. And as you adjust this temperature, you can adjust the proof that comes out. So on my steel, I can go anywhere from 120 and change to 187, I think is the highest. I didn't push it. I could have made this water colder, but the colder the water going into this, the more reflux you're going to get and the higher the proof is going to go. So you can kind of dial your proof in. And then you got a much longer, larger, it's a condenser here, shotgun condenser here. And these are great. You can pick these up in a lot of different places. I know Philbilly's got them, eBay, Amazon, but help our buddy Philbilly out, and if it's a few bucks difference, help him out. It's I'd rather pay him 150 than pay 130 to somebody in China, right? So, support your local shiners, That's what old Bruiser said. Y'all seen those? He's a character. I like old Bruiser. He's a good guy. All right, let's see. So as soon as I field all these questions, we're going to start going over this little thing I made here. All right, Henry. So you've got a similar one. So maybe next week. Now Saturday, I may not be here Saturday. So let's plan on next week. We're gonna talk about modifications to 3-pots. So if you know anybody else with 3-pots, maybe I'll put a word out. And anybody with a 3-pot still, we can talk. Well, I don't know. Maybe this after we go over this recipe and how to tonight, maybe we can delve into that. Remind me later on, and we'll get into that. It's a big discussion though, and there are certain things that you really almost have to do. How's it going, Mr. Audits? I'm Audits. What do you call corn with a big sugar head of brown sugar? 40 pounds corn, 50 pounds brown sugar. And to that, I hope you added probably 25, 30 gallons of water. And I guess you could just call it maybe a mountain rum. So it's kind of like corn and brown sugar, and that's fine. That'll probably make it a very good, interesting drink. It's perfectly fine. But I'd say, yeah, it's corn rum or a mountain rum. I'd call it a mountain rum maybe because you added the corn. Yeah, it's still rum. It's called a mountain rum. What's going on, Jeff? Yeah, there he is. The finer that you grind the cornmeal, the better the conversion. Definitely get a better conversion. You're exposing more of the starch. But again, I see what you're talking. I didn't even read the rest of it. Let me read it all. In a conversion that much better from cracked corn to finer grind like cornmeal, I usually steep. I struggle with my brew bags, hops filters getting clogged with cornmeal. Yeah, I've been using high temp and gluco liquid, and usually 6-row. Great. You don't even have to get malted, but that's flavor thing. Malted and the regulars has a little bit different flavor. Malted is probably going to be a little more expensive, but yeah, that's and you can start using 2-row. Because you really don't need the diastatic power of the 6-row. So if you get some 2-row, which is generally cheaper, and for most people, think generally has a better flavor. So now that we're using our liquid high temp and our liquid gluco, um, you may not have to get the 6-row malted. But I will say with the malted grains, and especially if you're adding other adjunct grains, like a wheat or a rye or something like that, there's beta glucanase inside that malted grain that helps break down the glucans in the wheat, rye, or whatever, the gummy glucans. That if you never made oatmeal, you'll know what I'm talking about. How it gets real thick, clear, kind of gummy, and thickens, kind of like gelatinizing corn, but it's clearish. It will help with those, and so having it malted definitely is a plus, and it all works together and definitely should help a lot. What's going on, brother? How's it going, Jeff? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, check it out. I posted it, and let's see. Good, got 3 pots, both of you. Good. Now we will go over that after we go over this recipe, and that's good. You can just proof it down to about 60 proof and rerun it, and just make the cuts again. It's no biggie, but just make sure that you proof it down. Use a alkalometer, hydrometer for proofing, and get the proof down, or mix it with mash when you're ready to run. Just fill it, 3/4 the way with your mash, and then add some of that alcohol on top of that, and it'll hopefully pick up some of the flavor of your mash and work that way. But yeah, you can just dilute it right with your mash. But yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and to I just worry about trust. What were they? What kind of equipment they had? What they ran it in? But you know, but yeah, if you drank it and it's just headsy, rerun it, and make cuts again. Well, just what you can do is they make a fitting, right? There's a bulkhead fitting that you can just drill a hole in your lid, and you can put this ferrule, and it's like threaded, and you just tighten it up real tight, and it's called a bulkhead fitting. And you can use those. They're pretty heavy and large, uh, and that lid's not the most durable. So and for you guys that are thinking about doing this, you can always just pick up a beer keg, right? 15 gallons. It's already got the ferrule on the top. You can pick them up for about 35, $40 on the Facebook Marketplace, and just keep your other steel. Then you can have another steel. But for the amount that you're going to spend on just that bulkhead fitting, you can almost buy a beer keg, right? They're pretty expensive. So, and it holds 15 gallons. So you can use your 5 gallon as a thumper for that. If you want to start experimenting later with adding a thumper, you can kind of convert it. But one of the biggest problems, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, is the condensers with those. And I definitely want you all to upgrade your condensers, because it's going to be really tough to get a good result and a good cuts and with the condensers that come with them, because they're grossly undersized and they definitely need work. So we're gonna go over that later on this evening. So stick around. We're gonna go over this beginner mash, and then we'll definitely uh, delve back into that and talk about that condenser. That was one of the biggest problems with them, other than just the little gaskets. But Phil, Billy, and Ian, um, not the lid gasket, but the small gaskets that break every time you want to tighten up those fittings into them and everything. So um, awesome, Henry. Henry got the football steel. Awesome. Well, that's great. 18.5. Good deal, brother. That's an excellent setup. You definitely won't regret. And that little column I showed you, Philby's got it. They've got it at other places. And this right here. Now, what you'll have to get is an adapter, and it'll go from that. The football steels have a 2.5 inch ferrule. I have no idea why they put that on there. 2.5 inch is kind of an oddball size. I mean, it's not common. I'm not saying nobody has parts, but the parts for it aren't as readily available, and they are generally more expensive when you do find them. I think even 3 inches are cheaper. So going from a 2 to a 2.5 reducer. Let me pull one. Let me find one here, and I can show it for you. Let me pull it up on Amazon. Hell, you might even get an Amazon deal right now. Let's see. Here we go. $20. And again, Phil Billy probably has these too, but let's see. Let me make a picture. Oh, Windows update. Oh, God. All they do is shit, man. Now, every time I open that up, every time I do my screenshot, it wants to save to. Let's just hope it put it in the file where it belongs, and it's not. Okay, good. Yeah, I did the update, and every update they take more and more of your free stuff away, and want to add that to the 365 program that they do. Here, just a second. All right, and we're back. Let me add that picture for you. And I like using these because I can sit and describe it till I'm blue in the face, and it's just until you see it. This is just called a concentric reducer, and it goes from 2.5 sanitary to 2. So you'll set that right there on top of your football steel, and then you can set just any standard 2 inch right here on it. Or you could go to 3, and threes are nice too if you want to, you know, get a bubble plate type column. I think Philby has those too, so you can check those out. But you'll definitely want to pick up one of these, and that way, once you do this though, Henry, then you could just start building with any 2-inch sanitary. They've got spools, they've got elbows, they've got T's, they've got cross, they've got Y fittings, they've got traps, there's sight glasses, there's condensers, there's deflegmators, there's so many different parts that you can now add to this, and they just snap right together. You just put your gasket in right here, you put your next piece right on top of that, and then you put your tri-clamp fitting on that, and then just screw it in tight, and it seals, and it's easy to put together and break down. It's like Legos, for steel builders and steel makers, and you can start getting really, you know, creative, with the steels that you do. So that right there is one part that you're going to need to go ahead and get. That way you can, you know, put you a good little column on there. And this is a great little beginner column. Like I said, Philly's got them, eBay, Amazon. I think they're all pretty much the same and comes from probably 2 or 3 companies in China. But again, Philly's doesn't. And you get service, and you can call somebody if you got an issue, and something comes in with a problem, they can take care of it. Whereas you're dealing with somebody from China, you might not get so much help. But yeah, you set these on top of it, man, and they'll up your proof. You'll go from 130 coming off coming off 130, 40 coming out of that canister filter, and you can replace that canister with this too. So you can come out of that football and go into one of this elbow at the top and go straight into that shotgun. And I think I like mine a little better. I like the shotgun condenser a little better than the canister, but they both work fine. Canister might smear a little bit unless it's mine. I think might have some loops because it's basically got a flexible stainless innards that it uses as the line. So mine might have some dips in it where it sits and has a little bit of smearing, but it's not going to be significant. But I do like the shotgun condensers, and also on mine, because China, the thread patterns never match anything ever. I went ahead and got a tap and die set to match these, and of course when I got it, and because I wanted to increase the size of plumbing going into here, because these were pretty small tubes, probably adequate, but I just wanted to increase my flow rate, especially going into this deflegmator, so I could increase the reflux more than what this was going to allow me to. So I didn't throw it away, but I kept all this plumbing, put it aside. I got all new plumbing, brass parts, and basically I can adjust. And these might have little adjusters on it too at this Y, where you can increase the flow from one to the other. That's a return line. But yeah, you go into the bottom when your water comes in, you'll go into the bottom fitting and out the top always. So on these both, you go into the bottom fitting with your input and let it come out of the top. So both. How's it going, John? Good to see you, brother. You just threw out your sugar shine and corn so hot you couldn't drink it. If it was too hot, remove 2 quarts. Right at the get-go, someone told me 164 degrees was too hot, or 164 proof, maybe. Dan, you don't have to throw it out, bro. You can run that on a column and clean it up, and it may be hot, but you can use it for mixed drinks, and maybe once you take it to 190 and then proof it down with some water or some juices or something like that. Might not taste so hot, but yeah. What's going on, Chris? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, we're on multiple platforms. We stream to 3 different Facebook, 2 different YouTubes. We're on Twitch, we're on Kick, and sometimes Rumble if we can figure out how to get the damn thing going. Damon can. I'm too impatient to enter all that stuff in manually. So I just say, Rumble's going without me tonight. So they can do it then. Hello, Miss Tammy. How you doing tonight? Good to see you in. Also, Tammy, did you send me a friend request on Facebook? Get up with me. Soft Keiko is a keg with a 4-inch ferrule on it. They call it a bright tank. It's about the same as an 18.5 gallon. Was going to get a reflux column to go with the Vever anyway. Awesome. How much? Just out of curiosity, John. How much was it? And I tell you, that 4-inch is pretty nice on an 18.5. Let me pull up a picture here. Now I'm not gonna. Let's see where. Let me think of this outfit's name. Let me get a picture of one of these. Yeah, this is it. Yeah. All right. Can't believe they changed my daggone. I guess it just automatically goes there. Maybe this will end up being a good thing. I don't know. I just don't like change. And that just happened with the update I just made to Windows 11. So, and yeah, it didn't. So, dang on it. It takes me a second to shuffle these screenshots around when I take them, but I want to keep them in my thing. That way, next time I need it, I'll have it there. But on top of that 4-inch, you can put one of these, and that little column is fine, especially for smaller stuff. But once you get up to 18, 20 gallons plus, you can put one of these on there, and it's and they're killer. So if you can see here, this has actual bubble plates in it, where the other one relies on a deflegmator for your reflux. These have bubble plates, so you get some scrubbing action and some, of course you got your copper helping to remove your sulfites, but you've got some reflux, and you can sit and watch it, and you can adjust the amount of reflux. You can put a deflegmator above this and turn it up and down, and adjust the amount of reflux that you have on your plates here, right? But this is a 4-inch plate. These are running from $250 to $300, depending on where you get it. I think Philby's got them too. If not, he can get them. But don't quote my price. I don't. After the tariff situation with China, I think prices kind of changed a little bit. But yeah, $250 to $300, and that's an excellent little scrubber. And some people buy 2 of them and stack them if they have a little bit bigger setup, but should work pretty well. You can put a deflegmator on top of it, and then of course your elbow, a couple of elbows come down over into a shotgun condenser or worm, whatever you run them. But yeah, these are 4-inch. So if you got a 4-inch on a keg, a bright tank, and it's 18.5. Yeah, going into one of these would be pretty nice too if you're wanting to do a column. Yeah, those work well. And that way you can kind of just use your football steel or regular bever just as a pot steel, and then use the one with the 4-inch ferrule on it to, to make your vodkas and your higher proof stuff. Yeah. Yeah, man. This is new. This was just after the last update. I do screenshots all the time, so it's within the last couple of few days. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, once you come out with that higher proof stuff and it's real hot, I mean, just proof it down and mix it with juices. If it has a bad flavor, I mean, if it's just hot, proof it down with your favorite drink, and or you can make an apple pie with it. Proof it down with apple juice. Put in a little cinnamon and nutmeg and a few other spices, whatever you like, and just proof it down. Yeah, that was actually, this is a 4-inch here. They do make a 3, but the big difference in the 4 and the 3, a little bit in price. But if you look at this, you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scrubbers. In a two, you got one. In a 3, you might still have one. There might be 3 max, maybe even if that, I don't know. But these really, if you're going to spend your money, this is where you want it to go. It's just the quality of what it'll do, and its capability is worth the difference. Save up a little bit more, wait a little longer. It's going to be worth it for you to go to the 4 for this type thing. For this, normally I'd say no, but for this, yeah, it's going to be that much better and work that much better for you. I wouldn't fool with a 3 or a 2 when it comes to wanting the bubble plates. Yeah, you definitely want to go with this. And for $250, it's not too bad. I'm picking one up, and definitely recommend y'all do the same if you want to run a column. I can't wait to put that deflegmator on it. I can go in and from 2.5 to 4, run it through 1 or 2 of these and go back to a 2, and it'll be just fine. What's going on, my drips? Good to see you, brother. That's good. That's definitely good. Yep. Well, if you want me hook up with me before you make your order, we can kind of look over things, and I might be able to make some suggestions and things. Um, but yeah, I upgraded my barb fittings and all that stuff too, and got a tap and die, increased the size of them. Uh, I think I went from 1/4 to 3/8 or something like that. Got a lot better flow, and it's you know it was easy to tap out, and now they don't leak. I mean, the other my fittings weren't even screwing in. Uh, I will tell you what I did though. Let me point out a really important thing. One of the biggest mistakes people made, and I wish I could go desktop and let you all see this important, but it's anyway. Can you all see this? Okay, that's good. For what we talking? What's 225, John? All right, what are we talking about here? Oh, those columns. This column. Yeah, it's. I mean, I've seen them on like Black Friday be around $100. If you want to wait for that, you might pick one up on sale somewhere. But I think the average for them is around $140. I've seen them, 130 average, 160, and But if Philbilly's isn't that much more expensive, get his. Help a brother out. That's all right, man. You hear? Yeah, it is. Even if you're paying 150 for this, if you break down these parts, just like this long spool, those are like $30. These sight glasses, those are like 20, 25, $30. So those two, there's 50, $60. This deflegmator, that's like 40, $50 alone. So, where are we at? So there's 110. Elbows are like 15, 9 to 15 bucks, so there's two of them. Got a little thermometer that's useless, but so, that's another $30. And then this long shotgun condenser, they're 50, 60, $70. And then of course the little dripper, they're not much, but and then all the fittings and gaskets in between. I mean, you're looking at 225 worth of parts you're going to get for 150, $60, right? Real good deal. Actually, I bought two of them. What's going on, Scott? Good to see you, brother. I will. I will, Tim. Yeah, you definitely. Yeah, I said that earlier that you need a deflegmator on the top to help regulate the amount of reflux that you're getting on the plates. That's awesome. Hello, Miss Lisa. Good to see you. What's going on up in Canada? Yeah, I think actually I think Fieldbilly's got some videos on that as well. So if you go to the site and just search, you know, keg spear removal or modifying keg steel, making a keg steel or something like that, because there's like two or three different kinds, and yet there's different removal methods for each depending on what they are. So check out oldfieldbilly.com. He's got tons of videos, man. It's a lot of entertainment. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I agree. See, I used to run a keg steel, and that was my biggest problem with the keg steel. I loved the size of it, and I loved, because it was much bigger than the old copper, and then of course much better than the old pressure cooker that I was using. But it was hard to clean, right? And I didn't have a pressure washer. I was poor. I couldn't afford a pressure washer, so I'd have to take 50 cents and go to the quarter wash and spray out the inside of it, every once in a while. I didn't get it. I just rinsed it out after most runs, but after a while, you start getting gunk built up in there, and it's like you can see it. So I just take it to the quarter wash and just spray it out. Wouldn't use any soaps, just to spray it out as best I could, and then take it home and rinse it out good. Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Yeah, like I was talking about earlier, you can just weld you a 4-inch ferrule to the top of the barrel and just go, you know, or a two. But with a 55, I'd recommend, probably a 4-inch ferrule or a three. Yeah, oak steels, that's fine. Is it like the one I have pictured here? If so, DeBosch, yeah, they're all made by DeBosch. A lot of them are. Actually, I bought mine before I even knew Philbilly had them. This was years and years ago. I don't even know if Philbilly sold them at the time. Probably didn't. It was just when he was getting started up. But I bought mine on eBay through DeBosch. So, but I think still there's somebody else that makes them. I don't think DeBosch does it. Has three upgoers. Okay, one down. So there's four total. Okay, that's not bad. I didn't realize there was four in them. Yeah, so three's not bad at all. Yeah. Now I will say I've noticed some difference in Denord. If you look at a lot of the Denord parts versus some of the other parts, Nord always has a much higher quality polish and feel and look to them than the others, but they all serve the same function and purpose. And other than aesthetics and looks, there's not any difference. And I agree. There's probably not that many factories there that put this stuff out. Just like Bever, I don't think Bever makes hardly anything they sell. They just buy stuff in bulk from a lot of different companies and put their name on it, and they may have that manufacturer make some unique changes that makes theirs a little more unique than others. But basically, yeah, they just buy from other manufacturers. They find they get that big volume discount from them and drive those prices down. And I, instead of doing the 65, Tony, I just go totes, brother. Once you get to that size, and the fact that you can let it, you don't have to run it all at the same time. You can just let it sit and ferment longer, and you know, especially with your brandies and stuff and wines. I'd get a tote, get a small tote. It in what kind of steel was it in? The football steel? I think you might have mentioned it up here earlier. It is a tad long on my football steel. The way I've got it set up, I get a drip just running pot still mode. I'll get a drip in about an hour. It takes about an hour, 45 minutes. Everything's pretty hot. In an hour, I'm getting a pretty good little drip. After about 4 hours, I think 3 more hours to get through my heads. I'm sorry, and then to the hearts and starting the tails. Generally about 4 hours total, 4.5 until I get to my tails, and that's then it's probably a couple more hours to get through the tails to where I just don't think it's worth my time to collect anymore. Probably around 10%. Once I get to the sweet water, collect me a little bit of sweet water for proofing. And with sweet water, it's kind of a misnomer. People think the sweet water is supposed to taste sweet, and when they taste it, like, this isn't sweet water. I'm not putting that in my liquor. The sweet moniker came from it's got ethanol in it, right? So it still has an ethanol content in that water. It's low, but there's still some alcohol in there, and it's not necessarily going to taste sweet. Actually, may taste kind of bitter and off, but once you mix that with the rest of the liquor, it blends into that liquor. You're adding proof, and you're not losing as much proof. Of course, there's some water content, high water content, but you're adding a little bit of alcohol back in. But you're adding a lot of flavors back in from that low end that will actually help. They're really good with aging, and I think a lot of people don't realize what with the aging process, a lot of those flavors get converted with some of the esters from the low heads, and where the heads and the hearts start. There's some esters in there that combine with some of those tails that you add and make some interesting flavors over time. Maybe for just a white dog, it might not be the best, but at the same time, you're not losing proof, and it doesn't cloud up as bad. So that's two of the benefits from using the sweet water. But yeah, it's not going to be like a real sweet. Don't expect something coming off that coming off the back set that's in there to be, the mash that's still in the steel to be very sweet. What's going on in Australia or Aussie, Australia? Good to have you with us, brother. That's nice, man. Yeah, that little digital thermometer, it was garbage. I've never used it on the elbow. It was kind of, hot glued in a hokey manner, and I didn't really like it. I don't use it, and I don't really go on temperatures except for my condensing my coolant temperatures, and that's the only temperatures I maintain. The rest of them I don't really care about, and I just go by the drip. Um, it is what it is, you know. I don't really care what the temperature of it is. But I do have a dial temp on the top of mine. I went ahead and got a 1/2 inch elbow with a 1/2 inch fitting, just like you did for that dial um, analog, and I like it. But you know, all it does is gives me an idea of what my vapor temp is, and I can expect things to start happening. But I already know in about an hour I'm going to start dripping, so it's not that big a deal. It's something to look at. I'd rather just look at my sight glass and watch the shit dance. I get mesmerized while I watch the drip. I'd rather watch the stuff dancing on the copper mesh in that sight glass than watch the drip. But you gotta keep in all those jars. Yeah, yeah. I like my thermometer on my coolant. Other than you know, on my coolants, you know that I'm running through my condensers. You know, I don't my coolant temps. I try to keep those at a certain temperature. Other than that, I don't care about the rest of them. How's it going in Arkansas? I'll be coming down your all's way at the end of the month. We're coming down to Clinton, Arkansas for their Music and Moonshine Festival. We were there last year. We look forward to coming down again this year. It's a great time, great people. Love it down there. I guess y'all have in Clinton, they have a big Halloween bash every year, so we're going to go for that. I'm going to dress up as a hillbilly. It's a stretch, but yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And I think on the November 1st, they have that Music and Moonshine Festival. They always have good music and wonderful people. And we're going to be with Appalachian United Initiative down there, um, accepting donations. I think we're going to sell some T-shirts and some other things, and have some of those proceeds go to Appalachian United Initiative, who's doing a lot of help with the victims of Helene Steel. And that's sad that we have to do that and say that, but they're still needing help. So we're still collecting and working to help them. And that Appalachian United Initiative, can't say enough good about them. I think Wes and April, they're you know, there's others. I hate start naming names, and I always forget somebody, but all the donations 100% goes to helping either buy materials or pay for carpenters, plumbers, electricians. They're building foundations, they're rebuilding houses, and they take no money off the top. There's no administrative fees, none of that shit at all. 100% of the proceeds go to either buying materials or paying for labor. Not enough volunteer labor, and that's understandable. Not everybody can do that, but great outfit, and they're making a lot of difference for a lot of families. They're wonderful. So we're definitely supporting them and helping them out in any way we can. There's other outfits that are doing the same, but I think some of those are keeping a little money for the initiative, and they're making a job out of it. And these guys, they have other jobs that they get their income from. This is something that they're volunteering to do. So we're 100% in with that. I love that, the idea of that, and need more of it. But if you get that much fruit, just get you a tote. You don't have to fill it all the way up. You can just every how many pounds of fruit you need, but it'll never be. I mean, you can get them up to 250 gallons. Depending on how much fruit you get, brother. Yeah, yeah. Get you a tote. Well, it serves a lot more purpose than looks. I mean, it'll bump your proof up. Again, it's not something that you'd probably want to use for like maybe brandies and stuff that you want to retain a lot of flavor. But those columns and a deflegmator for stripping flavors and high proof, they're awesome. 12-gallon stainless steel with reflux and bubbler column. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would, Chris, crank it up. What? Maybe next time, just crank it up full blast, and really, I don't think, I don't think it's going to hurt anything as long as you don't have particles and sediments and other things in there. Um, Let me take care of a couple things there. I think it's got some. I don't know what all those notifications were. Maybe they'll hit my PC here in a minute. But anyway, my phone was going crazy. Um, yeah, crank it up. As long as you don't have a lot of particulates in there, try to let it sit and clear for the most part. Don't patience is a virtue in this. You really have to have a lot of patience. So just clip and let it settle. I don't mean it has to be clear like water, but you just don't want it milky like milky milk. Um, you don't want a lot of particulates in there, and especially once you fill your still up and you got those particulates in there, keep it stirred up until it gets to temp, and then put your lids and stuff on if you can. Or that's why a lot of people use agitators, and so they can do that. But um, okay, yeah, yeah, I just crank it up. I think the one that on my stove, the I use two burners on the stove when I'm doing it inside on elements like a hot plate. My front burner's got like 3,200 watts, and the back one's like 19 to 2,200 watts, somewhere in there. And then I got a little warmer in the middle. I just crank them all up. So yeah, crank that sucker up. You might actually, if you have a stove on your stove, Chris, mine's got a glass smooth top, and I think high is like 9, but when I go to 8, and between 8 and 9, it stays on. It's got a red glow when it comes on, and it's an infrared. It's not induction. It's an infrared. So it that red glow stays red while it's on, and then it cuts off. Sometimes it'll cycle on like 6, 7. It'll get so hot, and then it'll thermostatically cut on and off, and you don't want that. But when I go to like 8, it'll stay on, and then when I go to 9, it'll stay on. So I just crank that thing up to 9, and once I get an hour in and I get that drip, then I'll just turn it down to about 8, and or somewhere between 8 and 9, and to adjust my drip, and I'm done in about 4.5 hours. So, and I don't, I don't go real ultra slow. Mine's a drizzle. It's not just a drip. Once you get up to, you know, at 12, you just want a really fast drip to a very small stream. The smallest stream you can get without it being a drip would be fine on about a 12 to 15. Um, so yeah, just crank it up. All right, yeah. I'm gonna be a hillbilly. I might put my coveralls on. That's what I'll do. I think it's a little long. 12 for 20 on a 2-inch column. Shoot, man, I run all, my tails all the way down, and I'm done. And I mean, tails and all. Well, it depends on how far I go, but 6 to 8 hours. If I take those tails down to Sweetwater, it'll never go over 8 hours. But I mean, it all depends on how you want to run it. If you like that slow, low and slow drippity drip, you know. And of course, it's different, in the strip run versus the final run. But I just run mine. I run it a stream and let her fly. Yeah, they're cheap as hell. You should be able to find them on Facebook Marketplace, and that you'll find plenty around here, Tony. You don't have to go that far. Oh, you are outside Chicago? Okay. Yeah, that's not a bad deal for a stainless drum. Get that thing and convert it. You can weld you a ferrule on the top and or get the bulkhead fitting. Does this have the rims where you can remove the tops, or is it the top that just has the two screw on caps? Yeah, I mean, the column's great to have. It's just a tool. It's like a nail gun. You've got certain nail guns for, putting up wood and framing, and you got certain nail guns for putting up, trim, and you got certain nail guns for, roofing. So, it's just another tool in your tool belt. Having that column is great for vodkas and higher proof distillates. But like in brandies and whiskeys, you generally want to keep your proof down and your flavor profile up. But it all depends. There's no right and wrong. You can run your brandies, your whiskeys, and anything anyway, and there's uniqueness in doing so every different way. Well, actually, carrying water over carries flavor over. There's a lot of flavor in phenols and flavonoids and all that jazz bonded with the water. It actually bonds those flavor and phenols and flavonoids and I can't remember what they name all the different ones. There's tons of them, but most of those bond to water much more readily than they do to alcohol. So a lot of times we're trying to defeat the distillation process. If the distillation process was perfect and you were fractionally distilling, you would have 95% ethanol coming off and no water hardly at all. And that would be great for vodkas and other stuff, but when you want to have that flavor, you really want that water to be with it, right? Because a lot of that water is bonded and contained, I'm sorry, a lot of the flavor is bonded and contained within that water. So you don't want it coming off at 80 or 90. That's going to, taste funny and it's not going to be that good. Some people, if you have a still that does that, traditionally they have to do 2 runs to get their proof up, in the old timey ones. But if you're coming off at 130, 140, that's perfect. You got a good amount of water and a good amount of alcohol there. And that's something that you can work with, going straight into a barrel, at 130, 120, you can proof it down a little bit, go in at 120, 130, and that's generally what a lot of them go into the barrel with. You can go a little lower the proof you go into the barrel with, the different notes that you're going to pull out of the barrel. So, that's always a consideration as well. But yeah, you want to carry some water over because that's where your flavor is. What's going on, Mash Brothers? Good to see you. Yeah, any fruits that you get, just bag them up and freeze them. Just anything you can get, bag them up and freeze them. And once you get enough for a big run, then you can let her fly. You hate the glass tops? Well, as far as cooking wise, I don't know, but for me, and what I do, it works pretty well. But mine's like a real old one. It's probably like 15-year-old Frigidaire, and I think the new ones kind of cycle more. I've got a new stainless one that I tried to use before, and it cycled, and of course I had a burner go out on it. And that old one just trudging right along, man. It's an awesome one, and that's what I cook on. But it it works out really well. It's better than propane. It's got where I'd rather do it on the stove there at that than outside on propane. Just simple cost, and the product's just as good. It works just as well. The propane probably a little bit faster, even, but 4 hours till I'm at close to the end of my heart's 4.5 hours. That's awesome. And of course, I'm using a front and the back burner, so I got a 32 and a 22 or a 19. I can't remember, somewhere, just say 2. So I've got 5,200 watts of heat, and the warmer that I use as well. I just, because it's got 5 elements on it, so it cranks it up, and it doesn't scorch, and it doesn't give it a bad flavor or anything. So I say the quicker you get that shit off, the better, and stripping it, and then you can do your final run a little slower if you want to. But yeah, yeah, and you got to also consider vapor velocities and other things like that. But yeah, I mean, so the bigger the steel, people think, oh, that steel will take forever to work off. Well, it doesn't, because they've got larger pipes on it, right? And the larger the pipe, the faster that you can work it. So you'd be surprised that some of these 100-gallon steels with 6-inch can work just as fast as a 20 with a 2. Sure can. That's what we're here for, brother. Any questions you got? And if anything I said you're not sure about, because my mind goes in different directions, and I get trail off one thought and jump to the next. I'm a little idle-minded sometimes. It goes in different directions. But if anything I say, if you're not quite sure, don't balk it, asking me to repeat it or clarify something for you, because I know a lot of times the way I explain things is weird. But yeah, if you have any questions or not sure about something, don't hesitate to ask. And for everybody that's in here, if you ask a question and I miss it, don't hesitate to ask me again. Just say, I asked this earlier. I think you missed it, and ask your questions. I won't get mad. I ain't like most people. I ain't all uptight and shit. I don't get pissed off unless you come in here and troll me or something. Then you'll get me pretty heated. But no, ask your questions, ask them again. If you don't understand, ask me to clarify it. I'm more than happy to. That's my 100% my reason here. I don't get paid for this. This is just something I enjoy doing. I enjoy helping people, and I want it to be safe, and I want it to be productive, and people enjoy the hobby. So um, ask away. And if I miss your question, don't hesitate to ask again. Let me know. I asked this earlier. I think you might have missed it. Be nice about it though. Like, say, I asked this once already, dumbass. You gonna answer it? No, might not be so nice, but yeah, just let me know. Say, hey, I asked this earlier. I think you might scroll past it, but this, and because I do, I get behind sometimes, and when I try to scroll forward, a lot of times it'll be Clint talking to somebody answering their question, and I read and I see he's got that handled well, and I'll just move on and let him and them kind of do that in chat. And I love having Clint here for that reason, because sometimes it's hard for me to field all the questions, and Clint's got the knowledge. He knows. And so if I get long-winded on one answer, he can kind of help give somebody another answer right off the bat before I can get to it. And sometimes if I see he's answered it, and if I have something to add, I will. But most time he does a great job. Love having him here. I love him. I will say copper does better. Copper is a superior metal for a pot still, hands down. But how much superior is it, and what makes it superior? And what's the downside, though? It's the cons. Now you got to weigh those when making the decision on whether or not to get one. The pros to having copper is very even heating, and it holds heat well. It removes sulfites from distillate, which gives you better flavor in your brandies and your whiskeys and your distillates. And those are the two big pluses for copper. The big negatives for copper are the cost and the maintenance and cleaning. So you got to weigh those. Now that we've got copper meshes that we can add to the vapor path in our stainless setups, sulfites aren't as much as an issue anymore. So basically now all we're dealing with is, even heating and You know, of course, aesthetics, you know, that old copper, it looks good, it's traditional, and you know, they're nice, they're really nice. But for those of us on a budget, stainless works really well. When you do get that copper mesh, though, make sure that you're getting a pure copper mesh and not some um, steel plated copper, or I'm sorry, yeah, steel that's plated with copper, because those are trash. Those will ruin a run. Those break down. They're absolutely the worst. So you can check them with a magnet when you get them. Most the ones I got on Amazon and aren't. I'm pretty sure Philbilly carries them too. Let's see here. Let's see if I can find one of the ones I ordered. No, hell no. It's taking this so long ago. I scroll too much. Anyway, just make sure that you're getting 100% copper, and it'll say on there. You know, they can't lie to you. But if they don't say 100% copper, if they say, you know, for a scrubbing pad or for finishing furniture or something like that, it might be a copper plated steel. Whereas, you know, they definitely run faster, but faster is a relative term. Faster than, you know, what? They run fast because, I mean, the amount that you got coming off the condenser is drastically different when you get a huge steel like at 13 versus 100. I mean, we're going from just as fast as drip as you can get or as small a stream as you can get, you know, spaghetti stream, to, you know, a pretty good, you know, a good stream coming out, you know, size of a pencil, you know, big, you know, good size stream coming off. So yeah, it's proportionally, yeah, they, you know, but you also, you know, like Clint was talking about earlier, you can't run that 100 gallon on a 2 inch. You can, but don't expect it to be a lot faster on a 2 inch versus a 6, which would be about a right size for 100 gallon, you know, to match the speed of a 20 on a 2, right? So yeah, I always go by the drip. Yeah, I would get the drum with the removable lid for sure. Makes it easy to clean inside. Um, and you know, make sure that you get something that the gasket would be easy to replace with a lid. But I think that there's silicones and stuff out there, 100% silicones that ethanol and ethyl acetate and stuff don't break down or have an impact on. So, and I'm sure they make replaceable lids if you can find the manufacturer of it. But yeah, the removable lids with the clamps and the rings, those are great. You can take that lid off, take it to a welder, put this clamp on there. They weld that clamp on there, bring it back, slap it on, you ready to go, bro. But also remember, you know, big, huge columns on those lids aren't the strongest, so you might have to have some support from above to hold the weight. I have to 110 good for a jar one out of a bit. You know, 110's okay. You know, it's fine. Generally the steel is what determines the proof, but sometimes when you have a low ABV wash or must or mash, sometimes it's just not going to come off high regardless unless you have a lot of reflux. But when you run a pot still mode, um, the proof that it comes off can vary, and that will be based on your mash. So I would say it's probably fine. Just have it all come out, and if you don't like the taste of it, the beautiful thing is you can just let it cool off, pour it back in there, and run it sucker again. You know, bring up the chart again with the color charts. Okay, so let me remove some of these. What's that going to say? Here we go. Need to remove some of these other pictures. I got a bunch built up here. I'm not sure which chart you're talking about. I'm assuming you maybe, are you talking about the cuts chart, this one? With the cuts and how you make your cuts, or are we talking about, because the two main color charts I use that a lot of people like is that one and this one. So that one, okay, yeah, and both of these charts are in the militia and in the DIY shining stuff files. So anytime you guys need them, get them, and go to it on your phone to download those. Having those on your phone and just something quick to refer to is great, you know, when you're running and stuff, because I can't remember all these damn temperatures and where all these different grains and all the temperatures. Much as I've done it, you know, I'm getting old, I can't remember shit. So I love having these charts to refer back to. They're great, and that's why I keep a lot of charts. But both of those are pretty good charts for beginners for sure. All right, now let's see. I'll scroll past some stuff, getting down to the bottom. There's on cuts. Okay, yeah, okay. All right, let me scroll and see if Clint. Yeah, Clint got that. Yeah, I would go. They have two different types. They have what's called an SCR and a PID. And that's basically the unit that controls the electricity and how it's sent to the element. You definitely want to go with an SCR, and I think that's trying to. It's a relay. God Almighty, my mind. Semiconductor relay, maybe semiconductor relay. Is that what that is for SCR? I think I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's a semiconductor relay. Yeah, I knew. I have to check myself every once in a while, make sure. And PID is, I can't remember what a PID is. Power inverter. I will have to check that one. I can't remember it. I didn't know all this shit. I haven't done it yet, so I'm not. Proportional integral derivative. That's why I didn't remember it. That's what PID stands for. Proportional integral derivative. I do know a PID will pulse, you know, and kind of like a, it will, it's kind of like it's on a thermostat. So it'll kick it and then it'll stop and then it'll kick it again. So that's kind of like the stove kicking on and off. We don't want that. So an SCR will just send a fixed amount of energy to that element, the heating element, and it'll be constant. And you increase and decrease it as you want, and you can blow your elements probably easier that way. But it's a constant temp to that element, and you don't have that fluctuation that a PID will give you. PID, man. Proportional integral derivative. Damn, that's why I didn't remember that. I've actually started out on a wood fire. That's how I got started. Now, coil stoves, I don't, you know, as long as it's not, you know, cutting on and off and it's sending, you know, constant power, any stove is fine. But the biggest problem that you'll have on running it on a stove is the stoves that have, even on high, that have that kickoff where it just doesn't get to a certain temperature and hold it like older ones do. They'll thermostatically kick off, you know, and you don't want that. So Yeah, Fieldbilly's got them. I mean, single, I think they go even higher. I mean, they go up to 5,500, 6,000 watt. I mean, you know, but you know, you have to start dealing with 220 and using your dryer plug in or your range plug in. Just unplug your stove and plug it in, which isn't a big deal. You know, you can sit it on the stove and it'll handle the heat, and just plug it in, unplug your stove and plug that in, and you know, I think most stoves are on a 50 amp, so that should handle most. So yeah, but Fieldbilly's got those, and you can build your own if you know electronics and electrical and stuff. You can build your own. It's you just buy the components and basically wire them together and put them in a nice little box and put you some plug, you know, mount some plugs. But on your, you know, you can use regular water heater elements, which I don't recommend. And you can use stainless. They've got stainless steel heating elements that I do recommend. I know I was talking about Denord earlier, has them. Make a good one, and a lot of others. And again, get those at Fieldbilly or you know, you know, eBay, Amazon, Fieldbilly. There's the big three, right? But I go with Fieldbilly. You know, check your prices. You know, if money's tight and it's really tight, talk to Phil. He may work you a deal, especially if you're buying a couple few things. You know, and if you can't, you get the free shipping and it's a little bit cheaper for you and things are tight. I understand. And Philbilly understands. You know, there's it doesn't hurt his feelings. You know, but anytime it's fairly close, if you can afford to, I always try to help out our buddy Phil. He's the one that helps make all this possible. You know, he pays for all the stream yards for us to get this out for everybody. You know, for Tom and Damon, for all of us. You know, he helps us all out, and even um, Frades and theirs. You know, they all do it under Phil, so he helps a lot. He does. Right now, I will say those. Be careful when you get those ball valves because they I ordered one once and it came in a 2-inch ball valve for these some bitches is probably like 40 fucking pounds. I got this. Fortunately, the one I got had a big ding in it and it was right on the ferrule, you know, and I was like, this ain't gonna seal well. So it got dropped because somebody picked up that small box and they didn't expect it to weigh 40 fucking pounds and it dropped and it dented the ferrule. So I got to return it. Well, I could have anyway. Is on Amazon, but man, those things are heavy as fuck. So unless you on a keg or something thick like that, it'd work. On a 55-gallon drum, it's going to be okay. But like on a bever pot or something small, I would go with something small, like a 1/2 inch or something like that, regular. And I would probably go with a welded to I don't know those bulkhead fittings would probably hold real well too, but those ball valves, if you're getting the 2-inch like the same size as the ferrules and stuff, those are heavy as fuck and they're hard to turn. Maybe this is because it was dropped; it was hard to fucking turn, but. Man, it took all I could to get that some bitch actuated and closed. I'm like, I'd bend the shit out of that pot trying to put it on there. So I sent it back. That's up to you, brother. That's the $1 million question that everybody has to ask himself. It's I love a copper pot, um, but considering all the maintenance and and the fact that we can now use the mesh to help remove the sulfites, they've kind of lost a lot of their benefits. So and a lot of big distilleries are going with stainless pots with copper plumbing. And it's just maintenance. It's just a pain in the ass to keep the suckers cleaned and seasoned properly. And yeah, definitely good advice. Definitely put your drain in there. You definitely want to have your drain. faux show. I see a lot of even in thumpers and infusers. I see a lot of drainless ones, and it's like, put a drain that thing. You don't have to worry about it overfilling and stuff, and you can kind of 13 run his 18. Yeah, I let mine fly, man. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I appreciate it, man. And I like, the benefit of those is you can watch them and go watch them. But the worst part is if you have a question, it takes you forever to watch all the videos until you get an answer to your question. And that's why I wanted to set this up. And 100% the reason I wanted to set this up is because, you know, even with Philbillies, so add Philbilly to your list because he's got a shitload of videos too. Cyrus makes great videos, and George, great videos, and but if you have a question to ask, it's tough. And a lot of times, if you ask it in the groups, you'll get 40 different answers, and then an argument, and then drama, and it's just and half the answers will be wrong. And even if it's an opinion, they'll give you some crazy ass shit. So that's why most of the reason why I did this, and also to help people, and make it safe. But it's hard to, you just have a simple question, should I do this, or how much this, or whatever. It takes forever to watch all those videos to get your questions answered. So, you know, that's why I set this up, so you can talk to somebody and get a direct answer. And I don't profess to know it all. Clint doesn't profess to know it all, but and our egos aren't bruised by having to say I don't know, but we'll check. A lot of people, oh, it would just kill them to say that, because they're the god of moonshine, right? And I don't I don't have an ego like that. I'm way beyond that shit. That's petty, stupid shit. So if we can't answer it, we'll find an answer. And sometimes we'll go to Google. Sometimes I'll call somebody. I'll call Alan Bishop, or I'll call. There's people out there that can answer a lot of the questions that we may have, and that I'm not sure of, especially when it comes to like distillates from all over the world. Alan knows all about, AdSense and the history of it, and where they originally made it and how they made it then. And I love that kind of shit. I'm learning from him on that. And I dig the hell out of that. Most of the basic questions about how to's and, all that stuff, me and Clint can handle easily. But there's a lot of the histories of stuff that I'm learning about, that's not part of the science. It's just part of the history. And then that's what I'm trying to learn more. I've got the science down to a science pretty much, but when it comes to histories and stuff, and where this originated, and different setups and stills, and and how they've done it over the last 2 3 centuries, it's amazing. So that's what I'm trying to learn more about now. And Alan has a really vast knowledge on a lot of how they did it in Turkish. They have this Turkish whatever, or this Slivovich that they made in the Ukraine, and this is they did it this way, things like that. He's got a lot of knowledge in the history of stuff, and I dig that. And they do a lot of reenactments and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. Have I ever run nitrous? No, I've never heard of this. Takes the bite out. Interesting. I've never heard of this, Kyle. I'm not going to recommend our users do this, especially if they got their surely they know to turn their burners off. But yeah, I've never. I know letting them out, and I've heard people running bubblers. You can run the little air bubblers, and that just agitates it, keeps it kind of stirred up. So a lot of the higher volatiles, the things that evaporate off first, can evaporate off first, and ethanol isn't at the top of the list. A lot of the heads and fours and things like that, the reason they have a lower boiling point is their higher volatility. So a lot of times when you air them out, those will come out first. But I've never heard of running nitrous. Have you heard of that, Clint? Right, right. Yeah, I've never done the beer thing. So see, John, you know things that I don't. Maybe sometime I can get some help from you about making beer and hops, using hops. I've never used hops in anything. I've never bought a hop. Smoked a few that I think might have been hops when I got shafted on some weed purchases when I was young. I think I might have bought some damn hops and smoked them at one time, but I've never used them in a beer. Yeah, I'm going electric. I'm definitely going to do it. Actually, I'm going to talk to Phil maybe this weekend. Ian's got a birthday party going. I'm going to try to go up to, so I may not be on Saturday. So if I'm not here Saturday, I'm gonna be up at Ian's partying, and his birthday's is coming weekend birthday bash. So I'm gonna probably try to make that and hang out with my brothers up there. So yeah, they make yeah, water heating elements. I don't recommend, and the thermostats. Yeah, stainless steel elements that fit right in. You just weld a 2-inch ferrule and get it a little off the bottom so it doesn't hit any kind of sediment you might have. So maybe an inch off the bottom, but not in the middle where you might evaporate, or allow yourself to run half a steel if you just want to run half and have your element low enough, because once that thing touches air, it's gone, because it relies on the liquid to maintain its cooling and its integrity. So yeah, you definitely. But I think Denord makes a pretty good quality one, and I think that's who Phil Billy sells is Denord. So yeah, 5,500. I think I might go with like 2 35s and use both of them to heat up and then one of them to run. I think a lot of people do a dual element, run two, just to get everything up to temp, and then cut one off, and then adjust your temperature on the other one to keep it to your drip, adjust your drip. But it's from everybody that has done it has said it's awesome. I had some reservations about it early on. I was concerned about scorching and all these other things, and I've really researched it and I've read the science on it. And basically, once these elements get to a certain temperature and they start boiling the water, there's actually a gap between the element and the liquid that is like, um, I guess it's like a vapor in between that doesn't allow a lot of that to actually come in contact with that element once it gets to a certain temperature. They don't even touch. But I've also seen some of those elements covered in grain and stuff where people thought that they could use those to distill on the grain, and it was a horrible mess, man. It had all kinds of corn stuck to it, and yeah, you don't want to do that. What's up? What's going on? Welcome to the show that never ends. Actually, we can do another one of those, and I know that you're into the wines and stuff as well, so you'll be instrumental in that. Maybe in November. I've got October's going to be busy this next weekend. This week I'm going to be gone, and then um, the 30th I'm going to be gone, so I'm not going to be able to do that weekend in November 1st. So maybe sometime in November we can do another one, and because I want to focus on, and when I say winemaking, it's for making wine. Now, what you do with that wine, you can make a brandy if you want to. But what I'm going to focus on making a really, really good wine for wine. So we're going to talk about using Campton tablets. We're going to talk about using acid blend. We're going to talk about keeping pHs, pretty strictly keeping pHs. We're going to talk about a lot about the temperatures and stuff that you're going to be using and specific yeast and stuff. So it's going to be pretty much geared straight for wine, but that wine, once you dump it in a boiler and run it, it's of course a really good brandy. But um, we'll just, that's just distilling wine. So we're going to focus on wine and how to make a really good wine to drink as a wine, and then what you do after. But there are some things that that you can omit if you're going to make a brandy and you want to do shortcuts, which will affect your flavor. But if you don't want to wait 6-8 months for something to mature to run it as a wine and into a brandy to get all that good character and all those flavors, you definitely don't have to. We know that a lot of the brandies, when they come off, if you can just taste the fruit that it was made with and get a little bit of that flavor and have it kind of sweet and a decent drink, then you've made a successful brandy. But I think a lot of people also want to learn how to make wine. We're not here just for moonshine. A lot of people like to make wine. A lot of people like to make beer, and when it comes to beer, I'm gonna probably let Clint and some of the other guys kind of take the reins, because I'm not a beer maker. I can make a beer mash, but as far as a beer, I'm just not. I'm not going to profess to know anything, because really I've never made beer. I never used hops and made a beer for beer. Now, I've drank quite a bit of my beer mashes and got a pretty good buzz on it, and made some pretty flavorful mashes that tasted good. I'm not much of a beer drinker, so that's the reason being I've never really made a lot of beer. But I was a Boilermaker guy, or I drank a lot of beer when I was young with my buddies, but that was just because I didn't want to get hammered. It was Wednesday or something, and I just didn't want to get drunk. I had to go to school the next day or whatever. But we'll definitely go over the wine, and I'll make it a special thing. We'll know, and I'll make everybody aware, and we'll set a date, and hopefully um, you're in the militia, aren't you, Mash? So I'll make a note of it in the militia that your next DIY or the next Distilling 101 is going to be for wine. And we can do another wine session. It's a lot of fun, and a lot of people are into that, and a lot of people, it just increases your knowledge. Yes, sir. You can use steel coats or raw. It's rolled oats. It's just don't get the enriched stuff. I don't like the iron fortified. Anything that has iron added to it, I just no. I put it back on the shelf. But um, yeah, just regular old oats. Just rolled oats, steel cut. Yep. Now it's not raw. They're not raw oats. They're the ones that you can eat. Directly without. But yeah, I do add oats to about everything. Especially all my grain mash. I don't add it to like my wines and brandies and all that stuff. But any grain bills, definitely throw a few handfuls of oats in there. And it's not going to be enough to give it a profile or a flavor. It's just enough to help soften things and get the mouthfeel. And I know a lot of people that do the same. And once you start doing it and you can see the difference, it's something that you'll continue to do. But as far as a whole lot of oats, those get pretty gluteny as well. So if you use a lot and you want to try a lot, you need to use some of the beta glucanase that'll help break down a lot of the glucans that oats have as well. Oh God, if Clint's asking a question. I've got a student with a problem I've never heard of. He put some clear product in a 15-gallon barrel, and a year later it was cloudy. Well, aside from having a contaminated barrel with maybe some beer in it, the only thing I can think of, it airlocked, or I mean it did. It's because alcohol, I guess, could evaporate off slowly, and it just slowly cut itself down to less than 80 proof, and it just, all of a sudden the tails and the oils start showing up because a lot of the alcohol evaporated off. I mean, is it still above 80, 90 proof, or is it low proof now? um, my first thoughts though would be something contaminated in the barrel. And when I say contamination, sometimes when you pressure wash that keg, or that stainless. Did you say stainless? You just said 15-gallon barrel, so I'm not sure what kind of barrel we're talking about. If this is a plastic barrel, I can say that it could be some microplastics. I do know that ethanol is perfectly fine in HDPE barrels. So, but, and that's what people do. They say, well, is my ethanol, can I store it in one of these barrels, one of these HDPE barrels? And when you look at the chart, and that's another chart I need to add. And when you look at the chart, it says, yeah, ethanol is totally inert to HDPE. So you can absolutely store pure ethanol in HDPE, and it will never break that plastic down. I shouldn't say never, but it's A rated. It very little, it's inert. But when you go down to that chart and you see where it says ethyl acetate and acetone, then you look over at its rating in HDPE barrels, and it's going to be B or C, which means that it's going to break down that barrel over time. So if there's a lot of fours and heads in that alcohol, it could be breaking down some of the components of that barrel, and that could contribute to it if it's an HDPE barrel. But that's a good possibility that if it's got acetone and ethyl acetates, which we know that there's going to be some in there, because unless it was pure alcohol that they put in there, that we know that there's heads throughout the whole run. Even in small percentages over a long period of time, it's going to start breaking that barrel down. If it's stainless, I'd just say maybe they washed it out with water, and there might have been some oils, hop oils, and things of that nature still in the barrel that didn't get rinsed out with the water, because it's what water will soluble. And once you put the alcohol in there, it immediately started, leaching those off. And over time, those oils, could have, leached out into the distillate and made it cloudy. It's interesting though. It's hard to say really, but that would be my just off the top guesses. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll put a note in there, and we'll do that. Yeah, I don't like the beer swell, man. I like the Boilermakers, and well, I shouldn't say that. I like some of those. When I went to France, they had some warm, dark beers that were like 12, 15% alcohol, and I was like, yeah, I'm not much of a beer drinker, but everybody's drinking. Oh, this is different. Well, and I tried those, and I really liked the deep dark flavors of those much better than a blonde hoppy beer. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely prefer a dark, rich beer, but I just soon have wine or whiskey. That's right. Oh, a barrel. Okay, charred oak barrel. Now, damn it, I did everything but charred oak barrel. Okay, went in at 130 proof. Wood, give it time to absorb. Yeah, yeah. With the charring usually has a clearing effect. I mean, you can even have some tailsy, cloudy liquor go in, and after a year, it comes out clear because of the charcoal cleansing. It has to be something that was in that barrel beforehand. Yeah, it has to be. Yeah, definitely has to be because yeah, that's generally it will clear things. It's a finisher. It'll clear. Yeah, there had to have been something in that barrel. I'm trying to think. Maybe a lot of times they'll use a barrel the first time for whiskeys, and then some of these. Maybe it was a port barrel. Maybe it was had wine in it at one time, and there was a lot of wine in it, and it got mixed with the whiskey and or whatever he put in there, and maybe that did it. It's hard. Maybe was it maybe a port barrel? I know sometimes people get the port barrels to give a unique flavor to their brandies and shines and vice versa. I know a lot of people put wine in a whiskey barrel to give it a unique flavor and stuff. And beer, they're doing that whiskey flavored beer stuff now, so they put a lot of beer in these barrels to get that flavor out. Yeah, it's hard to say, Steve. I don't know. Did they say what proof it came out at? Yeah, it's hard to say. But I know I've got a little 5-gallon barrel. I'm gonna be filling up for some brandy soon. I'll be ready for the festival season next year. So be prepared. This aged brandy is going to be the bomb, man, because I'm going to redistill all of it. And I've got some blackberry brandy and some peach brandy, both of them really good. And I'm going to think about combining them. And that watermelon, I got to clean that shit up if I can. I'm going to add it. If not, I don't know. Hopefully, I can clean it up, make a vodka out of it, if nothing else. It's horrible. All right. So, did everybody download that? Again, let's see. The name of the file is Simple Instructions for Beginners Mashing in Cracked Corn or Ground Cornmeal Using the Steeping Method. And I set it up for a 10-gallon mash because that seems to be the standard for most people with smaller bevers. They got a 10-gallon, and you can do a 10-gallon mash and get you about 8 gallons once you squeeze it all out, and just enough to put in a 10-gallon. Or you could increase it, double everything to do 20 gallons, or divide it in half to do a 5. But for those that tuned in later, I just uploaded to the militia page and to the DIY shine and stuff page. And if you notice, I didn't put my name or Bad Santa this and that because I'm not all about that. A lot of people want to put their name all over everything and get credit and do all this. That's not me. My ego's big enough as it is, and I don't need to inflate it anymore. Most people know me and say, "Yeah, that's right." But it's just it's a simple steeping method, and I'm going to kind of talk about it here and walk through it. I think we've answered a lot of the questions that we have, and we're a couple hours in. We got about 50 minutes more, so especially the beginners earlier. Hopefully, you guys were able to grab that. It's both the DIY shine and stuff page. I did verify that it went. Go to the file sections, and those files are basically sorted by the time that they were uploaded, so it should be right on top there for you. And next week I've got one that I'm going to put in there that's for multigrain. So and there's a little bit of difference there because once your temps get into the 135 to 55 range, that's when you start adding some of your adjunct grains. So, and this chart comes in for, very handy, and it shows you the temperature that you can add these. Now this green stripe here is the sarification range, and it's a rest that you want to, it's when your starches start converting into the sugars. And if you notice 155, this also coincides with the temperature that you add your alpha amylase, and that's not by chance. That's part of the saccharification process. And the high temp is made specifically to use for higher temperatures. It's great. But if you are using the alpha powder, um, at the top of this green charts when you add it, and any of these other grains that are in this, somebody asked earlier when to add other grains. That's why you want to refer to this chart. Now, if you'll see oats is kind of there at the bottom end of it at about 149.50, maybe. Yeah, right at 150. So the oats will be the last thing that you add, unless of course you're using, let's see, I think rye is a little bit lower than that. Actually, the rye is out of the saccharification range. So if that's a malted rye, then you can bump that top bubble up into the green. But just for a regular rye, you can add that later. It's just for flavor anyway, so it's not a big starch thing. I guess it is. If you're doing a high rye, then I would probably recommend malting some, and then you're going to have to increase your rest times and increase the time at 140 degrees that this rice sits in there, so it can break down. And there's still alphas that'll work, but pretty much once you get out of this green, they start losing their effectiveness. But you'll see that most of your grains are going to be in here. The barley that it shows here towards the top, that's not malted barley. That's just straight barley. Now you see barley malt. If you below that, that puts you in the green range. Same with rye. When you get a rye malt, it's going to put you in the green range. But the regular rye, yeah, you add that, and the oats there towards the end of that rest. Yeah, you can use malted rye. It's probably one of the toughest to do, because of its lower temperature range. But yeah, you can use actually malted wheat is one of the best things you can use. And a lot of people don't talk about that, but I think some of your malted wheats have a higher diastatic than a 6-row barley. So like 10, but still a little higher. But yeah, and since we're using the high temp amylase and our liquid glucoamylase, really the malting isn't as important anymore, except for flavor. Now some people like the flavor of a malted grain versus a regular grain, and some people will prefer the regular grain versus malted. And now that we're adding these exogenous enzymes, we can kind of get away from that, right? So let me go up here and delete that. So you don't have to necessarily buy that expensive 6-row anymore malt. You can get a 2-row and unmalted and see what flavors you can get out of that. Most people that do that, and most all your beer makers scoff at 6-row. This is they go to there. Let's just go to this discussion on the 6-row versus the 2-row. Most all your beer makers scoff at 6-row. 6-row is trash to them. It's junk. It's just for kind of us, right? For the malt and the high diastatic power of that. Most of your beer makers are going to use a 2-row, and there's lots of different 2-rows out there and different flavors that they profiles that they add. And there's a lot of different malt treatments, I'll say, when they caramelize malts and do other things. Of course, then you lose a lot of your enzymes in a period. But yeah, using malted rye is great. It's not gonna. I don't think the diastatic fit's going to be as great as a barley or a wheat, but it's fine. But you don't really need it for conversion, because we're now using the alpha and the glucose. Now I will say, when you do have higher amounts of wheat, rye, oats, barley, not so much barley, but a lot of these others, they bring a lot of glucans into play, especially when you start using high percentages of them. So when you do that, having some powdered beta glucanase or some natural endogenous enzymes from a malted barley or a malted wheat help immensely in breaking a lot of those glucans down. So that's something to consider as well. It makes it a lot easier to manage, a lot easier to clear, and therefore a little easier to run, and So, but let's get to the simple instructions. Now this is for 10-gallon mash, and for the did everybody download that and everybody see that? So basically, we're using this is a 2.5 pound per gallon ratio. You can go as low as 2, but when you do that, your gravity, specific gravity is going to be a 105.060 at best, and it's going to be okay to make a decent whiskey, and it's easier to manage and probably easier for beginners, but it's not going to give you quite the 106.070 that you want to get out of your grains to run. So 2.5 to 3 pounds per gallon probably going to be close to optimal, especially if you're using the powder amylase. If you use the powder amylase, I say go to 3. It's less effective on it, but you're going to get a lot more starches to convert, and maybe you can add just a tad extra of the powder, um, and you got to let it rest for a long time at that 155, and you got to keep it at 150, 155 by slowly adding water. Now, if you read the instructions here, anyway, we're 25 pounds of yellow dent number 2 corn, which is basic, just your standard corn. 20-gallon plus or 80 plus quart cooler. I think these coolers are optional. If you've got a big ass cooler, 80 quart, 120 quart cooler that you use for fishing and other stuff, or big parties and stuff, those are awesome because they will hold these temperatures when you steep. And that's the criticalness of these. The steep method is maintaining these temperatures, and I think that's when a lot of people fail at using the steep method. I think the problem is that they're using something that's not insulated. It's in a cool area maybe, and they're dumping all their water in at once and adding all the corn and just letting it sit, and it's cooling below it. It's an effective range. Now, if you add time to that, it'd be okay, but a lot of times they don't, and so they think in 90 minutes at 165 degrees. By the time they do it, 90 minutes later it's 165, and they don't realize that 20-degree difference adds an hour or two to the cook time, right, or the steep time. So that's why it's so critical to maintain those temps. And in these instructions, I'll have you starting with 7 to 7.5 gallons of water, depending on whether you're using high temp or powder, and then saving that extra 2 to help keep it warm. So every 10 minutes you go over there and stir it, check your temperature. Oh, we were getting 175. Let's add some more, stir it in. Okay, we're back to 185. And then 10 minutes later, go back. Oh, we're back down to 175. Add that hot water in there and bring it back up to 185. And you'll keep doing that for the 90 minutes, right? So every 10, 15 minutes, you'll go over there and add a little bit of water to it, get that temp back up, stir it in well, and get your cook time at that temp. That's why it's so critical to have something insulated to hold that temp, because if it gets cool, then you're going to need more and more water. And then it may get to the point where you're out of water and it's still cooling down because you're not insulated well enough. So you can also get a barrel and put it in a barrel. So get a 55-gallon barrel and maybe a 42, and then cut the top, set your 55 or your 40 on top of the 55 drum and measure, outline the size of your 42 near the top, and then cut that out, set that in there, and use spray foam or use plastic peanuts or whatever you can get, and pack in there between it any styrofoam, anything you can get to help insulate, or just the spray foam works really well. If you can get your foam stuff and get a long tube and plastic tube and get it down in there to the bottom and pull it up and just spray it all around. Or if somebody does the insulating stuff, if they got some of that, they can squirt in there and do any of that would make it an excellent insulated. But having a cooler is the best way. If you got a big cooler, those are awesome. So it goes through all the steps. Now, I will say this kind of deviates from what a lot of people do, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you don't need to worry about pH and all this." You don't have to. And a lot of this isn't a have to. But I'm trying to teach beginners the best practice and the best way to do it, and this is probably one of the best ways to do it for a beginner. Now, citric acid, bringing your pH of the water that you're boiling down to 5.3 will help your conversion. So it's not just to keep the pH low so bacteria doesn't build up, which is another one of the primary reasons. But one of the secondary effects is having that acidic water and that acidic environment actually benefits the conversion process. Facts. So it's good to have that. So some of the tools you're going to need, you're going to have 10 gallons of boiling water at a pH around 5.3. You'll need some citric acid or lemon juice to get it down to that pH. You'll have to have your little test pen or test paper to measure your pH. You're going to need a thermometer. I don't care if it's digital. I don't care if it's the laser that you point. They're not as accurate. You know, measuring the surface temperature is not the actual. Or you can get the old-fashioned type that's got like the mercury or something, and that's what I like to use. And I've got some that I've had for 20-some years and maybe longer. And I love those. They're a little, take a minute to measure the temperature, but the last thing you want to do when you're doing any of this is get in a rush. Mixing paddle or drill mud mixer. You can use the old paddle if you got the arms, you know, when you're young enough. You get older, you decide the mud mixer and the drill or the paint mixer, and all that's going to be better. So having those takes a lot of the work out of it and the sweatness. And I found that if you use the drill and all that, and it's not so much a job and it's still enjoyable, you tend to want to do it more often. But the more that it becomes work, the less you end up wanting to do it. I don't know if y'all like me, but you know, if you let your hobbies become work, then they're not so much a hobby anymore. All right, I'm gonna have to have me a little shot. I need a little lubrication. Let's see what we got here. Orange. Oh, I wonder where this came from. Oh, that's that high octane stuff. I know it. Man. Pretty good, pretty good. And I'll say that's from one of our viewers, but I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But pretty good, high proof, but pretty good. They do a pretty good job. Anyway, so high temperature amylase, optimal, or powdered alpha. See, I'm already starting to. It ain't that high proof. And then some liquid glucoamylase or powder. I definitely have marked on here optimal for the liquid high temp and for the liquid glucose. After using both, you'll understand why. The powdered glucose is not as bad, but the powdered alpha, it might be. I wasn't gonna name names, but yeah, it's Chris's. What proof's that shit, bro? 145? I have to have another little sippy sip. What is that, 145? It's got a pretty good nose. You know, it doesn't taste as high proof now as it did when I first got it. So it's kind of, maybe that's just me. 120. Yeah, I was gonna say it doesn't. When I first tasted that, I swear to God, maybe it's just maturing in there. But I remember when I first tried that, it was hot as fuck, and it's not near as hot as it used to be. So maybe it's just maturing a little bit. It's been a few weeks. Pretty good, buddy. It's good stuff. Done good, son. You done good. All right. So liquid glucose or powder. Iodine. If you want to do the starch test, you can do that then. I don't do that. I did it years and years and years ago, and I just quit. I just use my hydrometers and I don't care anymore. You're welcome, brother. and a triple scale. You know, you got to have to have your triple scale hydrometer. So those are the tools that you need, and those are, you know, at the top, everything that you're going to need for this. So grind down your corn to a coarse meal, or use cracked corn. And when I say crack, you know, just what you get out of the store, that's not proper. They call it cracked corn, and they crack it for animals so that, you know, animals can eat it and get the nutrients out of the middle without having to eat a whole kernel, which doesn't break down. And some animals guts, some can. I think, pretty sure. Ours can't. But a proper crack for moonshine, and I know somebody else was mentioning, I think John maybe was mentioning it earlier about having trouble with their brew bags and stuff. A good proper crack, one kernel will be 6 or 8 pieces. So if you could take that one kernel and imagine dividing it and quadding it off in the middle and sectioning it off, and each little piece, you know, should be about 6 to 8. And and yeah, but about 6 to 8 pieces per kernel of corn is a good crack. You know, but in some crack, you'll look through it and you'll have whole kernels, and most of it are going to be just cracked in half. So to me, that's not a really good proper crack. Can you run corn through a grain mill? Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what most of your grain mills are really designed for. A lot of the corn. Now, I will say, Mash Brothers, and do you have a certain name that you want me to call you other than Mash? I'll call you Mash. But Mash, wheat, hard red winter wheat is probably one of the hardest things on your grain meal. I know it's the hardest things on a blender or a food processor because, Lord, I don't know how many times my ex and I had gone at it over me using her blender, her food processor, and fucking up the blades and shit, grinding wheat. And it'll do corn okay, but corn's hard on them too. So I ended up having to start just going to Goodwill and getting my own, and uh, and using those because she got a new one and forbade me from ever using them again for that. But and they were a pain in the ass. You know, I did finally break down a few years ago during a Black Friday deal. I got a grain mill, pretty much the same blue with the hopper and the red end. You know, the same one everybody gets and uses. Um, all pretty much the same, but do check your wattage ratings. Some of them are lower wattage ratings than others, and some of them can do wet grains and some of them can't. So that's a big plus too if you can do, you know, put something wet in there. But yeah, once you get a grain mill, oh my God, life's so much easier. It's so much quicker than, you know, putting a bunch in a blender and shaking it and trying to stir it and agitate it and get all the solid ones down to the bottom, and then, you know, it just tears those blades up too. It dulls them in no time, and I guess you could do it that way. But yeah, I just now that I got the grain mill, man, it's just I can't imagine going back to any other thing or any other. It's so much quicker, so much more efficient. I will say, when you get your grain mill in, make sure you loosen up that grinding wheel. I think, you know, they may tighten it up all the way to where those wheels are together, so it doesn't move a lot in shipping or anything or something. I don't know, but if you turn that thing on, it'll grind its own wheels down, so you can adjust it in too far. And Justin's cool. Try to remember that, Justin. So you can grind it down to, you know, where the wheels touch each other if you got it tightened up too much. So don't over tighten those grain mills. Now I've seen the kind that crank by hand. Those are probably just as effective, but, you know, far less efficient. I've seen people put drills on there and increase the speed and the ability to do, and those work fine. I don't think they're going to last you as long, But man, having the grain mill is so much better, man, and not having to get cracked corn. See, the one issue when you buy the cracked corn is it oxidizes over time because it's already cracked. You don't have that husk and that kernel protecting and holding moisture in and keeping it, pretty much sealed like a little Tupperware, basically. So once that's cracked, um, you're getting oxidation on your corn and on it lowers its efficacy over time. And when you buy some of that cracked corn, if you're getting it from a store it's been sitting there for months and months and months, and they don't sell a whole lot, and they don't have a high turnover, some of that cracked corn will be 6, 8 months old. You just never know, and it's pretty much because I didn't get a good gravity, or I didn't get a good conversion. And it's like, you started out with some oxidized grain. It really didn't have a lot of good in it. So, that can be a problem. So one thing is buying whole kernel corn, getting that yellow dent whole kernel, and then cracking that, because that stuff will last a long time because it's got the husk and everything protecting that kernel, and you can keep that. I don't know, as long as you keep it stored in a cool, dry place. I'd say probably keep it for a year or two. As long as it doesn't get moldy, as long as it doesn't get cold and wet, or cold's fine, as long as it doesn't get wet. Now, I will say I like buying it in the fall and putting it in my big barrels. And like we were talking earlier, the strap top type that are dry and don't let any air in or moisture, and seal pretty well. Put all your corn in one of those and put it in an area that'll freeze. That way, any of the bugs or larvae, the weevils. I was trying to think weevils, and it didn't hit my mind right off the bat. I'm losing it. But the weevils and all the different bugs and stuff, borer beetles and all the other stuff that you can get in there, it'll kill them off, and the larvae as well. So then the next spring, you've got corn. You don't have to worry about it. Can store. You don't have to worry about having bugs in it and all that shit. And it'll kill all that off, the larvae and everything, if it gets below zero and where you live. And that's a good thing to do too. Keeping it sealed outside and just kill all that shit off, and then all the next year you don't have to, because unless you leave the top open and you got weevils coming in, flying into it, and laying eggs, they're gonna be pretty good. Yeah. So anyway, after you do that, you're going to grind it, get a good grind on it, and then you're going to get your water boiling. And we're just going over the instructions, and hopefully the beginners um, are following along and have the instructions. But I basically broken everything down. I didn't capitalize, use the punctuation. I'm just basically doing it line for line, and trying to keep it simple. And there's some things in here that you don't have to do, like the pH and the gravity and the starch and all those things. But for beginners, I think it's good to learn a best. Um, yeah, I tell you what, Steve, on Amazon, or not on Amazon, on Facebook Marketplace and Philbilly, and check Philbilly out. Especially if you're close by. If you're close by to Philbilly or within driving range, hands down, go to him for your grains, for about everything you need, because you can eliminate the shipping, and that's a lot of his costs. A lot of the costs that he has to, I mean, he can't take a loss to ship something, and it's expensive to ship. So if you're close to Philbilly and you want plastic barrels, you want wood barrels for finishing, you want some Sandman's, barrels to age in. So the stainless ones, you want, pretty much anything. If you're in driving range and you can get to him, that's probably going to be one of your best things to do, because it's free, no shipping, and he can give you some discounts, because it cuts into his profit when he has to ship, right? So he has to price things with shipping included, and if you come by and pick it up, you're going to get a discount. So, but yeah, I picked up some barrels for like 15, $20 on Marketplace. Um, yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, marketplace you can get these, and these were made. Mine were made. They're food grade. They were used in a pharmacy, and they're easy to clean out. I made sure that it wasn't some kind of crazy shit like fentanyl or something in it. Uh, Maybe that would be good. I could, but just rinse them, clean them out real good, and man, they're awesome. And they were cheap, and you can put them inside each other and stack them. That's another awesome thing about them. They're stackable, so even if you're in a car, you can bring 10 home because you just stuff them in each other, and it was, they'd be long, but it'll fit in your back seat, or depending on your vehicle. But so you can stack them up, right, and get several of them in a trip. But definitely the way to go, with those blue barrels and stuff. You get some type the lid screws on, some type. I like the ones with the bands that snap. Those seem to work pretty well, and those are airtight, watertight. And I've got one I've used for fermenting. I got a little bubbler in the top of it, and then the other ones I just use for storage and for fermenting in as well, and a lot of storage. And then couple an insulated steeping. Would I save tills for a proof spirit run, or just add them into other run? I just add them into other runs. Yeah, if I'm running something second for a proof, yeah, I'm probably not going to use the tails, and I'm going to run it differently and slower. Most of the times, though, I'll do multiple runs all at the same time. So when I do a triple run, I'll make cuts for all three of them. The cuts get smaller and smaller for each run because I make them each run. And so that, once you learn to smell and taste, you know how to make your cuts, and they get smaller each time. And I will save, in subsequent runs, if I get a little bit of heads out of the second and third run, I don't pitch those. Those are usually low heads, high heart kind of range things that are great for aging and great for adding to an off eighths bucket for a second run. And when I say bucket, not plastic, right? So we're not going to put any heads and store heads in buckets, because that ethyl acetate and that acetone will break down that HDPE. Um, Let me see if I can find that chart really quick. Oh, let's see. Here we go. This is um, okay. This is pretty good. This is a different chart that I'm used to seeing. Now I gotta use my. Let's see if I can open this up. Oh, that's great. You click on the motherfucker and it makes it smaller. That sucks. That sucks. All right, let me use my. So this is chemical resistant charts for HDPE, high density polyethylene. Now, E is 30 days of constant exposure to reagent causes no damage. G, little to no damage after 30 days. F, some effect after 7 days. And N, not recommended. Right at the very top, acetaldehydes is GF, little to no damage after 30 days, some effect after 7 days of exposure to the reagent solvents may cause swelling and permutation losses. That means I probably wouldn't do it. So right there alone, acetaldehydes at the very top. Acetone, EE, which is fine, doesn't bother it. But let's go to ethyl acetate. Oh, EE on that as well. Ethyl alcohol, we know that's absolute. That's EE. But if you look, there's let's see what propanol. phenolics. So most of this is pretty good, but your acetaldehydes, and you definitely have a lot of those, is a GF, and those are the ones that are going to cause some issues with your um, with storing in plastic. So short term, it's going to be okay, but long term, let's put it in some glass or some stainless steel. But I'm going to cut this chart. I definitely hate. I don't know. Maybe I'll like this change after I use it a while. Going into, maybe if I get a Photoshop Lite. I don't know. Is Adobe made a deal with Windows to have that? I mean, Photoshop's Adobe, so that's kind of strange. But yeah, I'll pull that chart and let's see. That's just. But I'm thinking in another one of my charts, ethyl acetate wasn't the same as what it's reading here. EE. Interesting. But there are some components other than just acetaldehydes that are in there that does actually have some more impact on amyl acetate. Maybe one of them. It's an EEG, which is butyl acetate, EG. So those are going to have a little bit butyl alcohol, E. Okay. That's interesting. I think the other one I read may be a little bit different. There's some, but anyway, it's not something that I would really. If you got a good stainless vessel or something like that, probably better. I would say even maybe if it wasn't acidic, aluminum would be better than plastic for a lot of things. But if it's short term, I guess looking at these, it's going to be okay. There's a lot of concerns about microplastics these days, and so. But that's definitely a chart that I'm going to add to my stuff. Let me do that real quickly. I can't see your all's comments right now because I'm in a different part here. So I've got to definitely add that chart to my, because that's something I talk about. And I want to find that other chart because I'm getting some conflicting info there for sure on some things. Okay. Yeah, I mean, for short term, 30 days or less, it's probably going to be okay. After 7 days, those certain things are going to start breaking it down. So, yeah, I just save them up. Yeah, I don't put them with the next run. Now, if I will say this, if it's just tails and I'm running the same thing over and over again, if it's the same exact thing I'm running again, yes, I'll add tails to that. The same tails, I'll put that over. But if it's like tails from a brandy run or a grain run and I'm running something different, no, I don't just mix those tails with something different. I'll just put them in a bucket with all the rest of the tails. And actually, um, all mine get jarred up. I don't even use buckets. I say bucket, but all mine's jars, painter's tape on the top, fours and heads, low fours, high heads and fours, for cleaning, low heads next to hearts, save those for aging, high tails, save that for aging, sweet water, save that for proofing. Anything in between just goes into a bigger jar or a stainless vessel. I try not to put anything in plastic except for like wines and stuff. I do my wines in the big 5-gallon plastic PET, polyethyltoluene, and a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't do it. You use glass carboys. Well, if you want to buy me $50 glass carboys to do the wine in versus a $2 5-gallon water jug, I'll be more than happy to change over. I just have so many of them that I use. It's and it's for secondary fermentation anyway. And I know Mash is probably like, oh, I use glass. You should use glass, and I probably should, but I'm too damn cheap. And yeah, actually, I don't know if this was for scare tactics for back in the day, but back in the 70s, where I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, moonshining was a big thing. And there was a lot of moonshining going on, a whole lot. Well, it's probably the center of moonshine capital of the world. Everybody claims that, but technically Eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, there across the border, Virginia, there across the border, just in that small area, is probably the heart of the moonshine in Appalachia. I know it's done all over, but that was probably one of the largest shine places there is. And it probably takes in a little North Carolina as well, and maybe down into East Tennessee, North Carolina. Should probably include that as well. But it just in that general circle there, West Virginia, Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, Eastern Tennessee, and North Carolina, in that circle, probably the heart of moonshine. But anyway, back in the 70s, they started, telling people, do not buy your moonshine out of a milk jug, because it's breaking down, these plastics in this milk jug, and it's, it's coating your livers and stuff with microplastics. Even then, they understood about microplastics and stuff, and it's it's becoming a problem. People having health hazards and all this. Now that could be just a complete fabrication and myth, just to scare people away from buying that old evil moonshine. But I don't know. It's how people are in the media. They still propagandize then like they do now. Oh yeah, yeah, I heard about that as well, man. It was, they said they're not welcome back. They're not having that again. It must have gotten crazy. You can use it to flavor it afterwards. A lot of people do steep in jalapeno. A lot of people will put them in their infusers. I don't know that I would put it in with my actual mask, because I'm not sure how some of those chemicals would react with your yeast. Um, I'm afraid some of those what's the word for the, I'm getting old, forgetful, man. Help me out, Clint. What's the word for the, yeah, just like reefer madness, exactly. What's the hot stuff in peppers? I'm getting senile. I can't remember anything. I know that, somebody help me here. God, I can't believe I can't remember these things. Man, my mind's going. It's right on the tip of my tongue. And as soon as I see it, I'm going to be pissed at myself. Capsaicin, yeah. I can't remember anything. Capsaicin. Anyway, I don't think the capsaicin will work well with your yeast. And while I've got that, let me grab that. Okay, capsaicin has a dual effect on yeast. It causes inhibition and toxicity at high concentration by disrupting the membrane structure and preventing resveratrol biosynthesis, but also promoting growth at lower concentrations through increased metabolism or acting as a food source. So probably not good to have that. It inhibits the growth of the yeast, like your Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Candida albanicans. So Albacan. So it definitely not something that you want with your yeast. Cinnamon also has similar effects. So probably not good to add to your mash, Brandon, but certainly is done by a lot of people and makes some really good shine by adding it to your thumpers, your infusion jars, or even adding peppers to your moonshine to let it soak and infuse and then take them out or just leave them in there. Maybe put a hot pepper in your jar and just let it sit there. Put the seeds in there. So yeah, capsation. I couldn't think of that word. Jeez. Mine too, Clint. You're getting old too, man. It's like simple shit, like funnel. What was it the last time? I couldn't think of it. It's just simple shit a lot of time, but capsation, yeah. But yeah, put your peppers in the thumpers or in your jar actually. That works quite well, and it makes good shine if you like spicy and you like a little spice and hotness. Hell yeah. And it'll if you want to use just a few peppers and make it, work over a larger, put it in your thumpers because that heat and cooking and all that in your thumper, just like cinnamon, will really multiply its effectiveness. So if you just have a few peppers and you don't want to do the steep method, then by all means put it in your thumper and watch out because it can get real damn hot. But it makes good shine. Good question. All right, back to so basically with this chart, it's getting late, and so those that have downloaded the chart, I want you all to try it or read through it. Clint, if you can read through it, see if I left anything out that you might think I should add. I'm trying to keep it as basic as possible, but at the same time, have them doing a few things like the iodine test if you want to do that and test for starch, remnants and pH. I'm not trying to get too much, but I want them to learn best practice methods and and I will say, on pH, once you start doing this, once you start getting experience, and I will say this is important for beginners and less so for seasoned, you'll know how much citric acid to add per gallon for whatever water source that you use. Now most of your water is going to be pretty close to neutral or slightly acidic. It's going to be like 6.5 to 7.0 normally. So you'll know pretty much how much citric acid that you need to add. So you're not going to need pH test papers and all that once you get used to it, right? So once you get used to your water source, whether it's tap water, whether it's you know, rainwater, whether it's stream water, creek water, well water, wherever you get your water from, generally the pH will stay fairly close. Now, we'll say certain areas after rains, heavy rains, if your creeks are up, your pH can change. But generally speaking, in your streams and stuff, generally your pH is going to remain fairly constant. So after a few times doing it, you're going to know I need X amount of citric acid for every gallon I put in here, and I don't need to look at the chart, and I don't need to use the pH paper for that because that's how much it always takes. So that's one less step. But for just getting started out, I want you to learn how to do it that way, and remember, just write it down. It took 3 tablespoons for this amount. We'll try it next time, and yep, every time it's taking 3 tablespoons. So, whatever 20 gallons, whatever you got going on, I'm just using that. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. It's in it should be right at the very top of the files, Justin. It should be right at the very top of both of them because I just added it to both of them today, and they store them based on dates they were added. So it should be right there at the top. And I'm sure there's going to be 20 or 30 people that are going to jump in here and, well, you don't have to do this, you don't need that, and do this. I'm not going to say don't listen to them, but don't listen to them. I'm trying to, teach a good practice methods. There's many, a slip between the cup and a lip, um, cup and lip, and there's many ways to make this. This isn't the only way to do it. It's just a good way for beginners, a good way for beginners to learn and to learn the best practice. A lot of people say you don't need pH 5.3. That's bullshit. No, they're full of shit. But 5.3 does help, and there's a reason that most of your wine makers, beer makers, and whiskey makers do that, right? So I don't know. You can listen to some dumbass that doesn't know, or you can, listen to what the pros say, and I'm not talking about myself when I say the pros. I learned this from them. So, and there is purposes, there is the chemistry involved, there is science involved in it, and it does help, period. Fact. Don't listen to them. It helps in the breaking down of your uh, carbohydrates and your complex carbs into sugars. It helps in the conversion of your starches. It also helps in the preservation of the mash and keeping your bacteria load down. It also helps the yeast because they prefer that acidic temperature. So, um, you know, yeah, well, I'm going to try to do, try to mix it all up. Yeah, it's we can do advanced stuff in here. I actually, on one class, we went real heavy scientific. We got into some major sciences on basically how the enzymes, these strings of amino acids that are bound together with van der Waal forces, and how they bond to the glucose chains in these complex carbs, and how they actually bond to each other and pry and pull apart each of these. So we've gotten into some pretty heavy science, but I agree we can do some weeks where it's going to be heavier science, and we've done one or two of those. I'm not sure if you was in on that, but I think you were in, Clint. We did that, and yeah, we can. Yeah, we can do, yeah, and I know there was some, a lot of folks that really appreciate it, because a lot of this stuff, it is rehashing a lot. And I feel that a lot of people, once they get to the intermediate and master levels, they have a little less need for me, because they probably know as much as I do, once they get to the intermediate and advanced level. So, but there are things, that I've learned from Clint's learned from me. So, there is some good, exchanging from people that are on intermediate and advanced levels. And I like doing that. But I would say probably 90% of the people are in the beginners into the learning and getting into the intermediate level, and maybe 10% or less that are high, intermediate, advanced. Um, so I try to gear things to them, but every once in a while, and I guess, we can try to set up things like, for the wine session, that's going to be get a little bit more advanced. We're going to talk about things and get a little bit more advanced in it. But yeah, we should probably, try to break it up and do some more advanced classes, and do, instead of 101, we can make it a 505 and get crazy. But I do like talking about the science and stuff. But I found that a lot of people, it just, it's like math. If they can't understand it, it doesn't really help them a lot. And a lot of them feel that I'm just coming off as a know-it-all when I do that, and I'm not giving them any practical things that they can use. Um, So I try to mix a little bit of intermediate in with it when I try to explain things on a simple term. I could explain things scientifically, but there's no need for that for a lot of people. They're not gonna, do this for a living and stuff. But I do remember, a lot of people during that technical class really appreciated it and loved it. And they're like, man, this is awesome, man. I love learning about this stuff. And this is things that I didn't know. And I guess I do a lot of times talk about a lot of things that intermediates and advanced know. So, you know, yeah, we'll do that for sure. And maybe we can pick specific topics, just about, like, you can make a whole class on just the enzymatic process and how it works. It's amazing, and well, yeah, that class where I broke down and showed, even pictures of how these enzymes look under microscopes and stuff, and how they're formed. And right, I try to do 101 to 201 in here. Even in this beginners things, I'm sneaking in some 201 stuff, and I don't want to call it science because it might set up a mental block in their head. But once we get past this and they learn this, then we can tell them why. But yeah, I'd say it is probably kind of getting old doing the beginners things over and over. But I found that most of the questions that get asked are kind of beginners questions, and we get a lot of beginners in here just getting stills and stuff, and those are the ones with a lot of the questions. But I do love doing the advanced, and we can get you in here, Clint, and maybe we can get Alan Bishop back, and we all three can do a joint thing together, and get advanced and talk about advanced topics, and and do some things like that. I've had Alan on before, and we talked about everything that he had going on so much we didn't really get into the advanced topics. He's got so many ores and so many water. Yeah, exactly. Liquid management, vapor cooling, vapor velocity. There's so much science involved, and I've got so many charts that I won't even dream of popping up there. You know, that'll just blow people away, and you know I could, it's like stuff like this, when you're showing where the linkages, and how many molecules in that it's getting broken and debranched. I can, a lot of people, they have no idea what all that is, where where the linkages are, and why when they say 1,4, 1,6, what they're actually talking about is how many molecules in that it's debranching, right? So stuff like that to a beginner, absolutely useless, but to an advanced class, awesome. Advanced classes, we can talk more about the endosperm, and where all the starches are stored, and in your germ, and where a lot of your amylase is stored in the grain and how it's stored, and we can get into some of that stuff and get advanced on that. I've got some charts here. Let's see, some advanced stuff that we can incorporate in, and here talking about cellulase, and this is you know help breaking down some of the cell walls and stuff, and how these enzymes interact and branch and link into the complex starches and stuff, and in this case cellulose and cell walls to break them down. It's amazing. I love talking about it on that level, but there's just not a lot of people that are really that far along that watch this. Usually by that point in time they're well blonde leading list low sand and stuff. But I do remember some people that really enjoyed it and appreciated it, and was beneficial. But at the same time too, there's a lot of people out there that are teaching classes like Amanda and Alan Bishop going to start doing some class work. I think Phil's going to too, and I definitely don't want to start getting into some of the advanced topics that they may want to teach. But at the same time, we're here to help teach on all levels, and but yeah, I agree. Yeah, we can definitely do some, we do a day for that, and just kind of advertise for it, and get some interest up, because there's a lot of people that do. You want to learn more about the science, you want to know why it does this, you want to know how enzymes work on some of these long complex strings of carbs, and how it breaks down these long strings of glucose molecules, and how it breaks glycosidic bonds, which is a very strong bond with a weak van der Waals bond, just by you know the enzyme bonding to the hydrogen in the water molecules, and both hydrogens in the water molecules, and attaching to this and actually breaking it apart, and how it denatures that enzyme once it does break it off. how everything from that part of contact past will denature, but everything before still is effective, and how enzymes work. It's amazing, and yeah, absolutely. That would be another great class. Yeah, and yeast making. Yeah, we can do some special classes and stuff like that for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's an excellent idea. And I'll get you to help me on that one, because I've never, I've used or I've got the yellow label to use. I've never used it yet, but I know what it does. And I know why it does it. And I know it's got the fungus included. It's basically, it's like the rum yeast. There's certain rum yeasts out there that have a glucoamylase built into, or not built into, but added to the yeast to help break down the molasses that normally doesn't just break down, and ferment. There's a lot of unfermentables in molasses and stuff. So using a good rum yeast with these glucoamylases in it that help break down and make them finish out dry. And I've seen a lot of people using molasses, and I'm stuck at 1.030 or 020 or 010, and I want it to finish on out. And you can basically do that with specific rum yeasts that have that gluco in there specifically for that. So yeah, we can start doing a little bit more, getting to the science of it. Especially, I want people to ask that question of why, and if they want to ask that scientific question, I'll delve into it and get there. But yeah, we can definitely. Yeah, see, and it explains why. So you're not just telling, what we basically do in the beginning is we tell people this is how you do it, and we don't really explain why. And if they're anything like me, and if they want to know why, that's what we're here for. Ask that question. If we don't have to stay intermediate, we can take it to whatever level that you want. So if you're curious on just how something works or why, or ask. That what we're here for. How does that enzyme break that down like that? How does that work? And where does it debranch at? I see all this stuff that says, this alpha breaks it off at 1 and 4, 1,4. What all does that mean? And we can pull up the charts and show you, it debranches so many molecules in. The 1,4, it breaks it down every 4 molecules. At 1,6 would break it down every 6 molecules. And different enzymes will debranch at different points on that long, amylopectin chain of carbs. So yeah, we can definitely do that, and I love it. But I just, it's some of the feedback I've gotten in the past has been mixed. Some people are like, I seem like I know it all, and some people dug it. But I appreciate everything you said, but I don't understand any of it. And some people are like, oh, you get a mixed bag. There's a lot of haters out there. But I try to feel the need, and I feel most of the need is for beginners, but I do see a benefit in teaching them how. But I'd love it for them to ask that, because it shows me that they got that, the drive to have to know why, because that's that mindset that makes you great, is having to know why everything works and why it does it and how, and and having to understand things on that level. And then people, those people generally will end up working in a distillery, and or a winery or wherever. And I love that. I'd love for some of the people that listen to us, and come in and learn from us, come back a year later. I really appreciate all the help. I went to Moonshine University after this, and their class was a cakewalk after listening to you guys, and it's helped me immensely in my job, and it helped me get the job. I went through the interview, and they started asking questions, and because I had this class and listened to you guys so much, you know, I blew them away. I was telling them things they didn't know, and things like that. That's what I want to hear, man. And knowing that I've benefited the industry and the hobby. So I want to appeal to both for sure. Yeah, yeah, we definitely will, and we definitely going to have us another wine thing. Justin, I got a nephew named Justice, so I'm trying to remember you by him, Justin. Um, and yeah, hopefully you can jump in and help us because I know you've been doing wines for a long time too. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot. There is definitely a lot of people out there that can show the basics, but not a lot of people field questions like this. There I will say there's a lot of people that don't do what I'm doing because their egos won't allow them to not be able to answer everything that's brought to them. And so I don't earn from streaming, so I'm not interested in that. I don't make a penny doing any of this. I'm not monetized on any platform, and not interested. My viewers are real viewers and real interested and ask questions, and I love it that way. And for those that are looking, when you see a number at the top of your screen and it says eyeball and viewers, that's just how many people are viewing on the where you're at. So there's so many on this Facebook page, so many on that Facebook page, so many on that one, so many on YouTube, so many on the other YouTube channel, so many on Twitch, so many on Kick, and it doesn't combine them all. This is just basically whatever, if you're on the Moonshine Militia page watching it, it'll show how many members from that are watching it, and so it will vary. I will say we got pretty good viewership on the average just on Facebook alone on the three groups that we do share to on Facebook. We'll average probably, and it's strange that the views that we get during the class are probably less than 10% of the total views that we get. Most people watch this and listen to it at their leisure later. So we'll probably get maybe 50, maybe 50 watching it live. And then maybe sometimes, closer to 100 counting a lot of the YouTube and stuff. And this is just Facebook. So, and it shows me the graph. It shows me people watch today, and over the next week, I mean, we get up to probably 500, sometimes 1,000 views just on Facebook alone, and that's unique views. Sometimes people watch it again the second time, so but that doesn't count. That just a re-engagement. So it's a little different, but yeah, we got quite a few people on here. Really, for the football steel, we can talk about that. Upgrades. Well, the first one, we showed earlier is this. Probably one of your better upgrades for your football steel will be a little column. And this will have your deflegmator here for your reflux. This isn't a bubble plate column. This is a reflux uh, column with a deflegmator. So it's not going to be a bubble plate type. So you'll put your metal copper mesh in here, or you put your copper mesh in the column where they've shown this little cutaway here. That's copper in this column here. I don't pack the column. I just roll it up and pack it in here so I can watch the level of reflux as it loads up on this copper mesh. But yeah, this is a simple addition to your Bever football steel. This will increase the proof. You can, if you have cold enough water going into this deflegmator, and you can adjust the coldness of the water going into it to, increase your proof. The colder the water, the more reflux, the higher the proof you're going to get come out. So you can adjust your proof with this setup, and you can make your vodka or your higher proof rums or whatever you want to make higher proof. So this is one upgrade. Now, as far as you can put whiskey heads on there and a lot of that stuff. Go to fieldbilly.com and Wayne at Ozark. Those are the two main builders that I know of that kind of specialize this. I think Appalachian Copperworks does too, but Phil and Wayne do a lot of stuff and make some whiskey heads and a lot of unique stuff that you can add to the top of your steel, Vever steel or keg steel. So they're both the same. They have that ferrule on the top, different sizes. Your keg will have a 2. Your Vevers will have a 2.5. on your footballs. But I will say on your keg steels, you need a special gasket for that. Philbilly's got those too. It'll have most of your gaskets on your ferrules will have a ridge on both sides that fit into a depression. If you notice when you look at this spool, there'll be a little indentation all the way around, and that's where the bump on your gasket goes into that depression, right, and fills it and helps seal. On your keg steel, one of those sides will be flat. Now you can take these regular ones and shave it off and cut it. A lot of times those will leak. Philbilly has those in stock, so you can buy them. It'll have flat on one side and ridged on the other, so you can attach this column directly to your keg steel. But this is probably one of the best upgrades for your Vevers, is to make you a good little reflux column. But if you want to make some, I mean, because the football itself is a rectifying whiskey head. That's what it's designed for. Now, most people don't use it for rectification. That's a little more complex. It's questionable how well it works on this. It might be a little gimmicky-ish. There is some effectiveness from it, but it's not a true rectification by any stretch of the imagination. So, but yeah, exogenous enzymes. So anyway, yeah, Philbilly, they make different whiskey heads around, lots of attachments. So yeah, check Philbilly at moonshine.com and Ozark Steelworks. And both of those guys are awesome people, do excellent work. So both of those can definitely hook you up. Appalachian Plateau, I'm pretty sure, does some of the same stuff. And Sean and them and Roy can help you out there too. Exogenous enzymes. Exogenous means they originate from outside. So exogenous enzymes are this liquid high temp that we add, and liquid glucose that we add, powdered amylases that we add. That's an exogenous enzyme. So they have origins from outside of the grain itself. Now, endogenous enzymes are enzymes that are contained within the grain, the malted grains that we use. So if we use like a malted barley, the alpha amylase and the beta glucanase that it has is going to be an endogenous enzyme, meaning its origins are from within the grain itself. So your malted grains are going to have those enzymes that are natural once you go through the malting process. If you don't go through the malting process, those enzymes are locked into that grain and they cannot be utilized without. Now I say that, and there may be some scientific thing you can do with acid and other things to get them ready for that, but that's not for distillation and drinking purposes. That's for something else in industry, right? So we're just talking basically on alcohol and enzymes for that. So I'm sure there's some acidic breakdowns that they do for that, but that's beside the point. Anyway, so exogenous comes from outside, endogenous. Now, when I say something like an endoenzyme, I'm talking about a beta glucanase or a glucoamylase. And when I say an endoenzyme, let me bring this picture up again. Okay, this right here is a amylopectin, which is a complex chain of carbohydrates. It's an amylopectin because it's got a branch. It's not just perfectly linear, it's branched like a little tree, right? So the branched amylopectin is branched, branched. Now, exogenic enzyme, exoenzyme means that it starts from the outside and comes inside and breaks it down, like an alpha amylase. An alpha amylase works from the outside and it breaks it off here at 1,4. You got your little A14 or your A16. Now, a beta glucanase or a glucoamylase is an endoenzyme, not to be confused with endogenic, not their origin. It's an endoenzyme, meaning it works from the inside out when it debranches. So there's a lot of confusion in that when you talk to people that are intermediate or beginners and they don't understand the difference between exogenous and exoenzyme. So there is a difference, and that's the distinction of the difference. The genus, that means where the origin. that enzyme. So exoenzyme, the origin of that exogenous enzyme is from outside of the grain. But an endoenzyme means that it's working from within the inside of that complex chain of molecules, of glucose molecules, to break and debranch those down. So that's a distinction that confuses a lot of people when they hear it, and they'll say, "Oh, you said that exogenous enzyme was from out." No, an endoenzyme and exoenzyme are basically just how where the actual enzyme is operating from and to. So alpha works from the outside in, and the endoenzymes work from the inside out, basically. Yeah, you can get little bubble plates to fit inside your shot glass, or you can make them. Yeah, I think basically though, I think that mesh, if you roll it up, you don't want to roll it up real tight, but it allows quite a bit of the vapor through, and it has a good um, area. It has a lot of surface area in that mesh to come into contact. So technically, I think it works as well as a 2-inch bubble plate would. Now that versus a 4, where you're getting you've got your deflag at the top giving your reflux, and you can measure the amount of reflux and gauge how long it's active on that plate bubbling. Then you're getting some pretty good exposure and re-exposure to the actual bubble plate itself. But a lot of that is just basically getting a lot of the water off and allowing a lot of the water to drain down and separating the alcohol from the water. And definitely. Yeah, the same thing with wine. I still love me some wine. I just don't get drunk on it. I just enjoy it with meals and something to just sit and drink a glass of wine just for the flavor, the taste. And I never was a sophisto or anything like that. But as you get older and that hard stuff starts affecting you more, it's pretty good, Chris. It you tend to drink a little less and less of that and that wine, as long as you don't get drunk on it. I love the flavor of it. Now, I used to hate wine, especially dry wines. I hate them. Now I dig it. Yeah, yeah, and that's something I don't know a lot about, especially once you get to the hopped. Now as far as multigrain and grain beers, yeah, I've made a lot of those and drank quite a bit of my mash. You know, all right, guys, it's almost 11:30. I'd love to sit here for days and days and talk and all, but we gotta rest sometime. So I may not be here. Chances are I'm not going to be here Saturday. I'm going to go to Phil Billy's little shindig, or for Ian birthday bash, hang out with my brothers up there. So um, probably won't be here Saturday. Anytime, Henry. Appreciate you showing up, brother. And for those that ain't left yet, click that like button. Click the subscribe button. If you're not following on YouTube, I recommend you at least follow over there, because they're really good about sending out notifications. And I know it's hard to remember. Our lives are so busy, full of stuff, and mine even more so now than ever. Um, you get busy with so many things. It took forever just to come up with this simple little chart thing. And I'm sorry it took so long, but there's so much going on right now. Winter times, I get a little better, so I don't have a lot of shit to do in the winter, and I don't get backed up. But appreciate everybody coming in. Hit that like button, but join the YouTube as well. Moonshine Militia or Phil Billy Moonshine on YouTube, because every time I start this stream, like clockwork, within seconds, bing, I get a little beep notification. And if that beep bothers you, you can turn it off. but they are really good about notifying you, and you can watch it at whatever, site you see it, whatever group you see it on. I try to cross post it with a bunch of different groups that a lot of people, seem to tend to go to and follow and enjoy. So I like getting it out there for them as well. But surprisingly, most people, and I guess because it's a longer show, if it was a 30-minute thing, I'd probably have a lot more viewers, but because initial viewers, but because it's a longer podcast, a lot of people don't have the time to sit and dedicate to it, especially on a Saturday night. I understand, so they tend to watch it at their convenience later, and I'm glad, and it's out there, that you can watch old episodes and check it out and go over them again and again, and then until you learn, and bring your questions. That's what we're here for. 100%. You can learn from, like Clint was talking about, George, Still in the Clear with Cyrus and them, both great. I know that I think Ian and Sean Rigsby are going to start doing some educational stuff as well. So that'd be interesting to, tune into them and see what all, and just watch them all. You're going to learn different things from different people, and both those guys are brothers, great people, and knowledgeable. And so, tune in and check them out. They're on Mondays, and very good guys. And I'm not trying to hog all the viewers and all this. People tend to go where they want to go, and where they get the information that they feel is best and pertinent to them. And I just want to be here to answer questions and teach the basics, and we can go into the scientific, the high, the higher level stuff from time to time, especially if you got those questions. So bring technical questions. If I don't know the answer and Clint doesn't know, we'll get, we're not too ashamed to get onto Google and search your answer for you. That's how we all learn. And that's why I was getting to earlier, and I never finished. A lot of people have too big of an ego to do a class like this where you accept a lot of question and answers because they don't have the answers, and they don't want to be known as somebody that can't answer even some of the basic questions. So, they act like they're Dr. Moonshine until it comes down to answering questions, and then they don't really want to field those live. They'll say, ask a question and I'll get around to it. Well, they'll Google it and find an answer and cut and paste and rewrite and come up with a brilliant answer for you. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as your question gets answered adequately, that's wonderful. But, you won't see a lot of those people, up here taking it live like Clint and I do, and answering your questions live. And we don't profess to know all the answers, we don't. So when we can't, we'll research your answer for you, and we'll find it based on our knowledge. We can find you the right answer, not just some bullshit off Reddit, right? So, yeah. But again, with that, you have to watch, half a dozen episodes to get your questions answered. So it's great watching to learn. If you just want to open up your mind and learn, they're great for that. But if you have a specific question, bring it here, because we're the only ones that really handle live questions. And that's what we're here for. And a lot of people won't do that because they just, they don't have that knowledge, and they can't, I'm losing it. I have to, sometimes, it may take me 15 minutes to think of funnel or capsation or things, simple stuff that I know, but I'm just starting to get old, and, there's going to be a day and time that I'm not going to be able to do this show anymore, and it's not rapidly approaching, but it's approaching, and maybe I'll have Clint take over when I just get to the point where I'm just, sitting here slobbering and drooling all over myself, not able to answer anything, So that day may come, is y'all get to watch the watch the degrade of Santa. You get to sadly see, you get to sadly see my knowledge dwindle. Well, right. And and to add to that, Clint, there's a lot of people out there that have much more knowledge than you and me combined, but those dudes don't have time for us. They've got professions, they're making the big bucks, and they don't have time for that. They're just too big, too pot, they've got $1 million distilleries to run and all this shit. So they don't have time, So, I think that Clint and I are probably the two of the smartest guys that are willing to take our time every week and come in here and help answer your questions and take care of you. There are other people out there that know more. I know that Alan Bishop, if he were able to take the time and do this, he's a family man. He's got young children. He's young. He's got a distillery. He's got so much going on. I know that he'd love to be able to do this, and he's probably one of the few people out there that could field questions live like this and answer them the same way. But he's just, he's got a lot going on in his life. I'm old, semi-retired, and I don't. So, and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy helping and enjoy bringing Alan on every once in a while when we can get him and he's got time. We'll try to bring him on maybe for some advanced stuff too, where we can all, combine and help answer questions and give our perspectives. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. And with that, we're past 11:30, so I better get off here before start turning into pumpkins or something. What is it? But anyway, won't be here Saturday, and I won't be here on the 30th either. So let's see, what is that? Excuse me, the 31st. I will be in Arkansas. Then at the Arkansas Music and Moonshine Festival. I hope some of you people down in that area can come see us. Hopefully Cyrus will be there because that's kind of down his neck of the woods. I really wanted to make the last one they had last week, but I've just got so much going on myself and it's so little time, and it's a pretty good trek to Fort Smith where they had that festival, and I definitely want to meet Cyrus, and maybe we can bring him on here sometime too and chat, and that'd be nice. But I want to keep the guests to a minimum because I mean, maybe I'll touch on that some other time. When you got several people doing a podcast, me and Roger and Mark did it in the past, and me and Roger did it in the past and stuff, and anytime it's just like family. Family can't go into business together, buddies can't go into business together, and anytime that you do combine and do things like that, there's always little things that start bothering you and they get worse, and little things that it always happens in business and in podcasting and any other thing anytime. So I try to keep it like this, and that way I don't have any egos to deal with, and including my own, and other people to deal with, including my own. So it works out real well this way. Sometimes I don't know, Clint wants to come on here from time to time, maybe we bring him on here, but I like the way it works here. Clint can help me out in the chat with the questions, and I can do the long-winded answers, and he can answer some of the different stuff while I'm off on some tangent talking about some crazy shit. He can help some of the other stuff, and I think it works. I think the way we're doing it, and Scott jumps in and helps from time to time. I think it really works well this way, and I really enjoy it. So we will bring on guests from time to time, but I think the way Clint and I are working it right now, I don't know if Clint wants to bring his ugly ass on here, because two uglies on here just don't make it pretty, So I don't know, but we'll bring some guests on from time to time. I've had a few on in the past, and we'll try to mix it up and do some advanced stuff. And I definitely want to get input from others, and if that's what they want, and people are saying that, I do know that there were a lot of people that did enjoy the science episode. Maybe we can do something like that again, because it is good information everybody needs to know. It's or some people want to know. I don't think everybody needs to know, but some people want to know. All right, everybody hit that like button and hit that heart and tell me how much you love me, and leave positive profile and share it with friends. If you got any friends that are in the hobby, and they're starting out, and they got questions, bring them here, and into the groups as well. But if you want an individual answer, and you don't want to get browbeaten, and you don't want people making fun of you for asking such a stupid, simple question, you'll never have that happen here, because it's all questions. Everybody has the basic same questions when they start. That's why a lot of these shows tend to get a little bit, repetitive. The gut turning flavor. Well, now, Dolores, it, are, well, first thing people tend not to realize is ethanol, just plain ethanol, proof down, pure ethanol proof down, has a bitter flavor. It's kind of sweet at a certain proof, but as you proof it down, it's not the best flavor, really. It's not. And um, even neutral, it's not that interesting. Yeah, yeah, the old beards of knowledge. Good night, Tammy. And I will send you a text and some info, and I'll send you a friend request. If I can, I'll look for your Facebook page. I can see your picture now, so I'll send you a request, and I'll get up with you about that hoodie we were talking about. But back to Dolores. Um, it really depends if you're what kind of shine it is you're drinking, and it may be some hazy. It could be haze that you're getting a little bit in. A lot of people that make moonshine get greedy, and they like to mix some heads in and some tails in, and it's not something that they're aging, and it's just to get more volume and make more money. And if that's the case, that's probably what you're tasting. If it's just a good shine, maybe that flavor is just the ethanol itself doesn't taste good alone. Brandies, tend to have some better sweetness and flavors because of especially infused. So maybe that may be part of it. Is this that you're just getting some hazy shine from somebody that's not making that great a shine, or getting too greedy on their cuts, or not able to make their cuts. But come to some of the moonshine festivals. They're all over the east, especially the southeast. It's like every 2 weeks there's a festival somewhere. And come to some of the festivals, and talk to some of the more knowledgeable people, and especially some that are willing to share some of their products, and even some of the legal ones. Taste some of what they've got, and see, because some of those have refined it. And I will say there's some legal ones out there that doesn't make anything better than a beginner novice, and a lot of them are beginner novices, and they're still in the business, and they just decided one day they wanted to get in and make an alcohol because they made $1 million in Bitcoin, and they don't have to work, and they decided, I think this would be cool. I've always wanted to open a distillery. I've always been interested, so I'm just going to open up a distillery. And a lot of times those are the people that you buy equipment at auction from, because they went out of business because they don't know how to make the shine. So I only made 2 runs with fruit, grapes, and peaches. Um, yeah, that could very well be, and especially if it's your first couple of runs, it probably is. Um, and I think a lot of people have high expectations. I think that might be a little bit of it too, Dolores. I think a lot of people have higher expectations for brandies and alcohol than what they get. Now, for like a brandy, a lot of brandies that you buy over the counter are post flavored heavily. They have added sugars, they have added fruit juices. You can get some peach brandies out there that just smack you with sweetened peach, and it just like you're drinking peach syrup mixed with alcohol. And that's, and if you have that expectation going in, and it drips, and you proof it down and it doesn't have that flavor, it's like, where did I go wrong? And it's not that you went wrong, it's just that you didn't post flavor like a lot of people do. Now, a lot of brandies, like I say, if you can tell what fruit it's made with and it has a pleasant taste, that's a very successful brandy. A lot of brandies will come off, and you have to be very knowledgeable just to pick up what fruit it's made from. Somebody handed me a brandy or something, I don't know. I said, "Oh, that's a pretty good peach," because I thought I picked up peach nut. It was like, "Well, that's blackberry." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't profess to have the best palate, but I did get something peachy tasting. I don't know, but it's good taste, and whatever the hell it is, I'm not that great at tasting. I'm not really great at picking up all these notes, and oh, I'm getting a bitter almond off the front, and there's that caramel, and then oh, I can taste a hint of this and that. I don't get a lot of that. So maybe it's COVID had something to do with it. When I got it, it messed with my taste buds for a long time, and I don't know. Maybe just some people have more. Maybe it's something that you develop. But on a lot of stuff, I can pick up nutty flavors and sweet, and caramel flavors and things like that from barrels and stuff. So I'm not totally bad, but I think a lot of times too, a lot of these people make up a lot of that just to make themselves seem, more, because I don't know, maybe not. I was like, I don't know, man. I'm not getting any nutty flavors from that, and all these different fruities and all these, they give you a list of 15 different things they're tasting, and I don't know, man. I think a lot of times they bullshit some of that stuff. But if it's your first two and you've done it with fruit, and it very well could be, because you're going to have a little bit more heads and stuff with your fruit, and you're doing a little bit more complex, um, mashes or musts, with going with the fruits first. A lot of people do just sugar shine first, and that'll have a lot of bite, but it'll have a pretty neutral flavor, so you get a pretty good idea of what just pure ethanol tastes like, without any influence of most anything else. But a lot of times too, you'll get a sugar shine that's had a stressed yeast that's going to give some off flavors as well. So there's a lot of things that can go in to contribute to some off flavors, and that's why we're here to try to teach you how to keep your yeast as happy as possible. Because when the yeast are very happy and content, they don't produce a lot of off flavors. But the more that you stress them and the less happy they are, they start exuding, you know, off flavors. And it's kind of like us. We're happy if we're in an air conditioned room, relaxed. But once we get to working hard and getting all sweaty, we're starting to put off some foul odors and things. And I guess it's the same thing with your yeast. Once you work them hard and they get stressed, they start putting off some bad flavors. So, but I think working on your cuts and just tasting, the jars, separate the jars, maybe go with smaller jars and see, taste them all and see if there's any one jar that tastes a little better than the others, and right in your hearts. And if so, then maybe it is a cuts things. Maybe you've got some smearing going on and it's doing that all the way through. There's a lot of variables, and so hopefully we can cover that and tune in. Now, I won't be here Saturday, but we're usually here every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 Eastern, and we usually stick around till 10, 11, sometimes 12. And I'm sticking around a little longer tonight because I'm not going to be here Saturday. But and I want to answer a lot of the questions, and especially good questions that come in late like this. So um, thanks for asking your question, and keep it up. And one thing about this, if you don't like the flavor of it, you can proof it down and run it again and see if it comes out better the next time. And you can also try infusing and using, take an immersion blender into a jar of peaches with the syrup and just blend it all in and make a puree of peach and syrup, and put that in your thumper or put that in your infuser little by little, and see if that helps your profile any. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks that we can get you doing, and learning to make cuts, though, that's the most important thing. And I think that might be, part of it. So, but we'll get you to where you're making something you're happy with for sure. And with that, I'm gonna get out of here. 11:45 is great session, great questions, great participation. Love it. Again, like, subscribe, give Phil Billy, check him out, check his page out. If you have any supplies, especially corn or anything you need, you live around him, definitely do it. Yep, it is, and a lot of times that's probably the case. A lot of times people get a little sugar happy, and they get their they get their mashes at a pretty high initial gravity, and stresses the yeast, and it makes a hot shine to begin with, and you couple that with all flavors from the yeast, and there's not a whole lot that you can do other than call them and bubble and run them again, but we'll get you settled where you can get it. Just keep bringing your questions and we'll work on cuts. If you have any questions about cuts, we can talk about that, and we can cover everything and anything you have to ask. And tune in, and we're going to have a wine session. Check if you're not in the militia, join the militia and the DIY Shining Stuff page, and we're going to do a wine. And this will apply to you because anytime you're dealing with fruits, you're basically making a wine before you distill it. So we're going to do a wine class and how to make a good wine. And once you make that good wine, you can make good brandies if you can make a cut. So we'll cover all that and take care of you and get you where you can enjoy your hobby a little bit more. So with that, I'm going to say peace out, shine on. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you here next Wednesday. Y'all have a great week and weekend, and we'll see you then.